Hello there, my dreamy travellers. Tonight, beneath the soft glow of twilight, we venture into Bella Swan's final chapter as a human. A story of choices made, of vows spoken, of impossible miracles and the price of forever. Here, in the space between breathing and not breathing, between mortal and immortal, between one heartbeat and eternal stillness, a transformation awaits. So, before you settle in, please support us and subscribe to the channel so we can keep creating these Twilight stories. Well, now it's time. Get yourself settled in. Close your eyes. Breathe in very slow. And let the gentle darkness embrace you. And drift into this journey where love demands everything. And everything is willingly given. Welcome to Breaking Dawn, where endings become beginnings and dreams never fade. Bella Swan woke on the morning of her wedding day to the familiar sound of rain against her bedroom window. It was early, too early for anyone else in the house to be awake, but sleep had abandoned her sometime around 3 a.m. and refused to return. She lay still in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling she'd memorized over the past year and a half, and tried to comprehend that this room, this house, this life would soon exist only in memory. In a handful of hours, she would become Isabella Cullen, Mrs. Edward Cullen. The name felt strange even in the privacy of her own thoughts, like trying on an identity that didn't quite fit yet. But it would fit. It had to, because she'd chosen this path with absolute certainty, despite all the complications it carried with it. The dress hung on the back of her closet door, a ghostly presence in the pre-dawn darkness. Alice had insisted on keeping it at the Cullen house until 2 days ago, as if Bella might somehow damage or lose it if left to her own devices for too long. The assumption wasn't entirely unfair. Bella had a well-documented talent for disaster, and a 100-year-old wedding gown that had belonged to Edward's adoptive mother deserved more careful handling than Bella typically managed. She turned her head on the pillow and looked at the dress now, seeing its silhouette rather than its details in the dim light. It was beautiful in a way that made her uncomfortable, the kind of beauty that drew attention and demanded to be noticed. Everything about this wedding was designed to be noticed, to be remembered, to be absolutely perfect. Alice had seen to that with the determined efficiency of someone who'd been planning this event in visions for months before Bella had even agreed to it. The wedding was Alice's gift to them, Alice had said. Her chance to create something beautiful and meaningful for her favorite brother and the human she'd claimed as a sister, long before Bella had officially joined the family. Bella had wanted something simple, something small, something that wouldn't require her to be the center of attention for hours while hundreds of people stared at her. She'd lost that argument before it had even begun. Alice's visions were absolute. She'd seen the wedding in a dozen different iterations, adjusting details each time her sight showed her a flaw or imperfection, and what Alice saw became reality through sheer force of her determined will. So there would be 10,000 flowers, all white, filling the Cullen house and spilling into the backyard where the ceremony would take place. There would be hundreds of guests, both human and vampire, gathered to witness Edward Cullen finally marry after a century of solitude. There would be music and toasts and dancing and cake, all choreographed to Alice's exacting specifications. And Bella would wear the dress and smile and pretend she wasn't terrified of tripping during her walk down the aisle, or saying the wrong thing during the vows, or somehow ruining this perfect day that Alice had constructed with such meticulous care. The sky outside began to lighten, though the rain continued its steady percussion against the glass. Bella sat up slowly, her body moving with the careful deliberation of someone who hadn't slept nearly enough. Her reflection in the mirror above her dresser looked pale and tired, dark circles under her eyes from too many nights of anxious sleeplessness. Alice would fix that, she knew. Makeup and confidence and absolute certainty that everything would be exactly as it should be. Bella stood and walked to the window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. Somewhere across town, Edward was either hunting one final time before the ceremony, or sitting motionless in his room, listening to the thoughts of his family as they prepared for the day ahead. She wondered if he was nervous, if vampires could feel the kind of anticipatory anxiety that was making her stomach clench and her hands tremble slightly. Probably not. Edward had a century of practice at appearing calm and controlled regardless of what he was feeling internally. And he wanted this wedding even more than Alice did, though for entirely different reasons. For Alice, the wedding was about beauty and celebration and family. For Edward, the wedding was a necessary condition Bella had demanded before he would agree to transform her. The bargain they'd struck months ago remained clear in Bella's mind. She would marry Edward first, would experience this traditional human milestone before surrendering her mortality. She would have a wedding and a honeymoon and a chance to be with Edward as a human woman before becoming something else entirely. Only after all of that would Edward agree to change her, to bite her with the intention of creating rather than destroying, to give her the immortality she'd been begging for since the moment she'd learned what he truly was. It was a fair trade, Bella supposed, though Edward's reluctance to transform her at all still caused friction between them. He saw transformation as damnation, as stealing her soul and condemning her to an existence he'd spent decades resenting. She saw it as a necessary step toward forever, toward a life where she didn't have to fear growing old while Edward remained frozen at 17, toward a future where she was strong enough to stand beside him, rather than always being the fragile thing he had to protect. But first, the wedding. First, this last great human ritual. First, standing in front of everyone she knew and promising forever to someone who actually meant it literally rather than metaphorically. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Bella!" Charlie's voice, rough with sleep. "You awake?" "Yeah, Dad. Come in." Charlie opened the door carefully, as if expecting to find her still sleeping despite her response. He was already dressed in jeans and his police uniform shirt, though it was barely 6 in the morning. Sleep had probably been as elusive for him as it had been for her, though for different reasons. Couldn't sleep either, huh? Charlie said, leaning against the door frame with studied casualness that didn't quite hide his discomfort. Too much on my mind, Bella admitted. Yeah. Charlie was quiet for a moment, his eyes moving from Bella to the dress and back again. Big day. The biggest, Bella agreed softly. Charlie cleared his throat, a sound Bella recognized as his tell when he was about to say something emotional and was trying very hard to sound matter-of-fact instead. You know, I have to ask one more time. You sure about this? You're 18, Bells. There's no rush. You could wait, go to college, see something of the world before settling down. They'd had this conversation a dozen times over the past months, and Bella's answer had never changed. I'm sure, Dad. I love Edward. I want to marry him. I know you do, Charlie said, and the resignation in his voice made Bella's chest tighten with guilt. I can see it. Hell, everyone can see it. The way you look at each other, it's like no one else exists. I just worry that you're too young to understand what you're committing to. Marriage is forever, Bella, or it's supposed to be anyway. If only he knew how literally she meant the forever part. I know what I'm doing, Bella said gently. I know it seems fast to you, but when you know, right? Charlie's expression softened, memory clearly pulling him toward thoughts of Renee, of his own young marriage that had started with absolute certainty and ended in divorce years later. Sometimes you think you know, he said quietly, and sometimes you're wrong. I just don't want you making the same mistakes I did. You didn't make mistakes, Bella said firmly. You and Mom were happy for a while, and you got me out of it, which couldn't have been a mistake. No, Charlie agreed, his voice rough. You were never a mistake, Bells. You're the best thing I ever did. The emotion in his voice threatened to undo her completely. Bella crossed the room and hugged her father, feeling his arms come around her with the careful strength he'd always used with her, as if she might break if he held too tight. In a few hours, she would walk down an aisle on this man's arm, and he would give her away to someone else, and their relationship would shift in ways neither of them could fully anticipate. After the wedding and the honeymoon, after her transformation, Bella wouldn't be able to come home for months, or possibly years. Newborn vampires were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too driven by thirst to be trusted around humans. Charlie would have to accept some excuse about college or travel, would have to believe she was simply busy building her new life rather than understanding she was literally becoming something else. Eventually, she would return, changed in ways he wouldn't quite be able to identify, but would sense nonetheless. She would be too pale, too perfect, too still. She would be beautiful in an unsettling way, and Charlie would feel uncomfortable around her without understanding why. The easy relationship they'd built over the past 2 years would become strained and strange, and there was nothing Bella could do to prevent it. I love you, Dad, Bella said against his shoulder, meaning it with her whole heart. Love you too, kid, Charlie managed. He pulled back and cleared his throat again, swiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. All right, enough of this sentimental stuff. You want breakfast? I could make pancakes. Your mum always said my pancakes were the one thing I cooked that was actually edible. Pancakes sound perfect, Bella said, even though her nervous stomach probably wouldn't be able to handle eating anything. They went downstairs together, and Charlie busied himself with mixing batter, while Bella sat at the kitchen table and watched him. This house had become home over the past 2 years in ways Phoenix never had. The quiet routine of living with Charlie, the comfortable silences, the unspoken understanding between them. She would miss all of it desperately. Renee was arriving this morning, flying in from Florida with Phil for the wedding. Bella hadn't seen her mother in months, their relationship maintained through phone calls and emails rather than visits. Renee had been thrilled about the wedding in her effusive, slightly scattered way, asking 1,000 questions about the dress and the flowers and whether Bella was absolutely certain she wanted to get married so young. Unlike Charlie's concern, which came from a place of worried protectiveness, Renee's questions had carried an undercurrent of excitement. Renee had always been a romantic, someone who believed in following your heart regardless of what practical wisdom might suggest. She'd married Charlie at 18 and had never regretted it, even though the marriage itself hadn't lasted. She'd married Phil after knowing him for only a few months, and that relationship seemed to be thriving despite its impulsive beginning. So Renee understood, in a way Charlie couldn't, the urgency Bella felt. When you found the person you were meant to be with, why wait? Why pretend you needed more time when you already knew with absolute certainty what you wanted? Charlie set a plate of pancakes in front of Bella, and she forced herself to eat despite her nervous stomach. They didn't talk much, both of them lost in their own thoughts as the morning light strengthened outside and the rain finally began to taper off. By 7, Charlie was heading out for a few hours, claiming he had some last-minute errands to run, but probably just needing space from the emotional weight of the day ahead. Bella cleaned up the breakfast dishes and then returned to her room, where she stood under the shower for a long time, letting the hot water ease some of the tension from her shoulders. When she finally emerged, wrapped in her bathrobe with her hair dripping down her back, Alice was sitting on her bed with an expression of fond exasperation. "You were supposed to call me the moment you woke up," Alice said. "I've been waiting at home for hours, and you're already awake before dawn." "Sorry," Bella said, though she wasn't particularly sorry. She'd needed those quiet hours with Charlie more than she'd needed Alice's cheerful efficiency. "Never mind," Alice said, already moving past it. "We have exactly 5 hours before the ceremony begins, which is just barely enough time if we work efficiently. Come on, everyone's waiting at the house." "Everyone?" "Rosalie, Esme, your mother just arrived." Alice's eyes brightened. "Renee is lovely, by the way. Very enthusiastic about everything. She cried when she saw the flowers." Bella's mother crying over flowers sounded exactly right. "Is she okay?" "She's perfect. Happy and excited and only slightly anxious about you getting married so young, but she's good at hiding it." Alice stood and picked up a bag Bella hadn't noticed, sitting by the door. "I brought clothes for you, something comfortable for the drive to our house. You'll change into the dress there." The next hours blurred together in a haze of activity that Bella participated in without fully processing. The drive to the Cullen house, where the backyard had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. The explosion of white flowers everywhere, wisteria and roses and orchids, and a dozen other varieties Bella couldn't name. The white chairs arranged in neat rows. The archway where Edward would be waiting, wrapped in more flowers and trailing white fabric. Inside the house, organized chaos reigned. Esme welcomed Bella with a warm hug and gentle assurances that everything would be perfect. Renee was already in tears again, overwhelmed by the beauty of the house and the preparations and the sheer romance of it all. Rosalie was surprisingly warm, her usual cool reserve softened by what appeared to be genuine happiness for Edward. Alice commandeered Bella immediately, dragging her upstairs to begin the long process of transformation from ordinary Bella into a bride worthy of the spectacular wedding that awaited. Hair first, twisted and pinned in a style that looked effortlessly elegant, but probably required immense skill to create. Then makeup, applied with such care that Bella barely recognized her own reflection. Alice had somehow made her look beautiful without making her look like someone else entirely, enhancing her features rather than disguising them. Finally, the dress. Alice and Rosalie helped her into it with reverent care, fastening the dozens of tiny buttons that ran down the back. The dress fit perfectly, flowing over her body as if it had been made specifically for her rather than for someone else a century ago. The long train pulled on the floor behind her, and the veil Alice pinned in her hair completed the transformation. Bella stared at herself in the full-length mirror and barely recognized the person looking back. She looked like a bride. She looked like someone confident and beautiful and ready for this enormous step. She looked nothing like the clumsy, anxious girl who'd arrived in Forks 2 years ago, certain she would never fit in anywhere. "You're perfect," Alice said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Edward is going to lose his mind when he sees you." Renee appeared in the doorway and promptly burst into tears again. "Oh, baby, you're so beautiful. You're so grown up." She crossed the room and took Bella's hands carefully, as if afraid of disturbing the perfection Alice had created. "Are you happy? Are you sure?" "I'm sure, Mom," Bella said, squeezing her mother's hands. "I've never been more sure of anything." "Then that's all that matters," Renee said, wiping at her eyes. "I just want you to be happy, sweetheart. That's all I've ever wanted." The music started outside, the signal that guests were beginning to arrive and take their seats. Bella's heart rate kicked up several notches, anxiety and anticipation warring in her chest. In less than an hour, she would be married. In less than an hour, her human life would begin its final chapter, the countdown toward transformation officially starting. Charlie appeared, looking uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo, but also oddly dignified. His eyes went soft when he saw Bella, and for a moment she thought he might start crying too, but he managed to hold it together through sheer force of will. "You look beautiful, Bells," he said gruffly. "Edward's a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Bella corrected, and she meant it absolutely. Alice orchestrated the pre-ceremony timeline with military precision, sending bridesmaids down at perfectly timed intervals, ensuring every detail unfolded exactly as her visions had shown her. Finally, it was time. The music shifted to the wedding march, and Alice gave Bella one last radiant smile before disappearing to take her place. Charlie offered Bella his arm, and she took it, grateful for the support. Her legs felt unsteady, her breath shallow, but determination carried her forward. They walked through the house toward the back door that would lead to the aisle, and Bella could hear the rustling of the crowd beyond, hundreds of people waiting to witness this moment. Then they were outside, standing at the head of the aisle, and Bella's tunnel vision narrowed to a single point. Edward, standing beneath the flower-wrapped arch, looking at her with an expression that held such love and wonder and reverence that everything else fell away. The guests disappeared. The flowers and music and spectacle of it all became meaningless background. There was only Edward, waiting for her at the end of that white carpeted path. Only the boy, no, the man, the vampire, the impossible love, who had transformed her entire existence simply by choosing to speak to her that day in biology class. Only the person she was about to promise forever to, meaning it more literally than anyone else present could possibly understand. Charlie squeezed her arm gently. "Ready?" he whispered. Bella took a breath, steadying herself. "Ready." And together, they began to walk toward forever. The walk down the aisle felt both endless and impossibly brief, time stretching and compressing in ways that made no rational sense. Bella was aware of faces turning toward her as she passed, aware of the whispered appreciations and the soft sounds of emotion from the crowd, but none of it truly registered. Her entire focus remained locked on Edward, on the way he watched her approach with an expression that transcended simple happiness into something closer to awe. He was beautiful in his tuxedo, though Edward would have been beautiful wearing anything or nothing at all. The formal clothing simply provided a frame for the marble perfection of his features, the sharp lines of his jaw and cheekbones, the impossible smoothness of his pale skin. His eyes were their warmest gold, evidence of recent hunting, evidence of his determination to be as controlled as possible for this day when he would be surrounded by hundreds of humans whose blood called to him with varying degrees of intensity. But Bella's blood called to him most strongly of all. She was his singer, la tua cantante, the one who sang to him specifically with such power that their entire relationship had been built on his moment-by-moment choice not to kill her. And yet here he stood, waiting to marry her, to bind himself to her in the most traditional human way possible before binding himself to her for true eternity. Charlie's grip on her arm was tight, almost painful. Though Bella doubted he realized it, she could feel him struggling with this moment, with the reality of giving away his only daughter to someone he didn't entirely trust, despite months of forced civility. Charlie had never warmed to Edward the way he'd warmed to Jacob, and Bella understood why, even if she couldn't explain it to him. Some part of Charlie sensed what Edward was even without conscious recognition, some primal instinct warning him that this pale, too perfect young man was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with bad intentions. They reached the end of the aisle, and the minister, a human man who had no idea he was officiating a marriage between a human and a vampire, smiled warmly at them. Edward stepped forward, his movements carrying the fluid grace he could never quite hide, and Charlie reluctantly released Bella's arm. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the minister asked. The traditional words weighted with meaning in this particular context. Charlie's voice was rough when he answered, "I do." He turned to Bella, and she saw his eyes were wet, though no tears had fallen. He kissed her cheek gently, whispered, "Be happy," so softly only she could hear, and then stepped back to take his seat in the front row beside Renee, who was already crying again into a handkerchief. Edward took Bella's hand, his fingers cold even through the barrier of her skin, and the jolt of electricity that always accompanied his touch ran through her nervous system. His eyes met hers, and she saw everything she felt reflected back at her. love and certainty and wonder that they had somehow arrived at this impossible moment despite all the obstacles that should have prevented it. The minister began speaking, his voice carrying across the assembled guests with practiced projection. Bella heard the words without truly processing them. The standard language about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage. She responded when prompted, her voice steadier than she'd expected. And Edward's responses were clear and certain. No hesitation in his vows, despite a century of avoiding exactly this commitment. Edward Anthony Mason Cullen, the minister said, using Edward's full name and Alice's insistence, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? Till death do you part. The phrase would have been ironic if it weren't so inadequate. Death wouldn't part them. Death would transform Bella into something that matched Edward, would make her his equal rather than his fragile human burden. Death, when it came for her humanity, would be the beginning of their real forever rather than an ending. I do, Edward said, his voice low and intense, meant for Bella alone despite the hundreds of witnesses. I absolutely do. Isabella Marie Swan, the minister continued, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? Bella didn't hesitate. I do. The ring exchange came next. Emmett stepped forward from his position as Edward's best man, producing the rings with a grin that suggested he was enjoying this far too much. Edward took Bella's ring first, a delicate band that had belonged to his human mother Elizabeth, passed down through Carlisle to Edward for exactly this purpose. He slid it onto Bella's finger with infinite care, his cold fingers gentle against her warm skin. Bella took Edward's ring, a simple platinum band they'd chosen together, and managed to slide it onto his finger without dropping it, despite her trembling hands. The physical symbol of their commitment now rested on both their hands, visible proof of promises made. By the power vested in me, the minister said, his voice warming with genuine pleasure, I now pronounce you husband and wife. He paused, smiling at Edward. You may kiss your bride. Edward's hands came up to frame Bella's face with careful reverence, his touch feather-light despite the strength he could have used. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to close the distance if she wanted, and Bella met him halfway. Their lips touched, and the kiss was nothing like the passionate, desperate kisses they'd shared in private. This was gentle and sweet and achingly tender, a public declaration of love witnessed by everyone who mattered to them. The crowd erupted in applause, and Edward pulled back just far enough to rest his forehead against Bella's, both of them smiling like idiots while the world celebrated around them. Hello, Mrs. Cullen, Edward murmured, too quietly for human ears, but perfectly clear to Bella. Hello, Mr. Cullen, Bella whispered back, testing out the name, feeling how it fit in her mouth. Strange and wonderful, and absolutely right. They turned together to face their guests, and the applause intensified. Bella saw her parents in the front row, Charlie looking resigned but genuine in his attempt at happiness, Renee crying and beaming simultaneously. She saw Edward's family scattered throughout the first few rows, all of them smiling with varying degrees of emotion. Carlisle and Esme looked like proud parents, which they essentially were. Alice was vibrating with joy, her visions having predicted this moment perfectly. Jasper stood beside her, his gift working overtime to manage the emotional atmosphere of hundreds of humans and vampires gathered in one place. Emmett was grinning broadly, already anticipating the reception and all the opportunities it would provide for entertainment. Rosali's expression was complicated, happiness mixed with something darker that Bella couldn't quite interpret, but suspected had to do with Rosali's own lost human life and the choices that had been taken from her. The recession down the aisle was faster than the processional had been. Edward and Bella moving together as a married couple while their guests stood and applauded. Bella caught glimpses of faces she recognized. Jessica Stanley looking stunned that Bella Swan had actually married Edward Cullen. Mike Newton's expression carefully neutral, but his posture radiating disappointment. Angela Weber smiling with genuine warmth, happy for Bella, without reservation. Eric Yorkie taking photographs with the camera he'd brought, documenting the event for the school newspaper despite this being a private ceremony. Mixed among the humans were vampires Bella recognized from brief introductions over the past weeks. Members of the Denali clan, who'd traveled from Alaska to witness this unusual marriage, their golden eyes marking them as vegetarians like the Cullens. Other vampire friends of Carlisle's from his centuries of existence, most of them intrigued by the human bride who knew what she was marrying into. The Volturi had not been invited, would never be invited, their existence a threat that loomed over this entire celebration, despite everyone's attempt to ignore it. But that was a problem for another day. Today was about celebration, about the public acknowledgement of a love that had seemed impossible from its inception. Today was about Bella choosing Edward and Edward choosing Bella, witnessed and blessed by everyone who mattered to them. They reached the house, and Alice immediately swept them into the organized chaos of the reception. The backyard had been transformed again while the ceremony was taking place. The chairs rearranged around small tables, a dance floor installed in the center, an elaborate buffet set up along one side for the human guests, while the vampires pretended to eat and drink with practiced ease. The afternoon blurred into a series of moments that Bella would remember with perfect clarity later, but experienced in a haze of overwhelming sensation in the moment. The first dance, Edward guiding her through steps she barely knew, while he did all the actual work of making them look graceful together. Dancing with Charlie, her father stiff and uncomfortable, but trying his best, telling her he loved her and he just wanted her to be happy, even if he didn't understand her choices. Dancing with Phil, her stepfather who'd flown across the country to support Renee, and who seemed genuinely pleased for Bella, despite barely knowing her. Toast from the wedding party. Emmett's speech that managed to be both funny and touching, referencing inside jokes that made the Cullen family laugh while keeping the content appropriate for the human audience. Jessica Stanley's toast that revealed more surprise than pleasure, her barely concealed envy that Bella had captured someone like Edward. Alice's toast that was pure joy, her happiness radiating from every word as she celebrated her brother finding love after a century of loneliness. The cake cutting, a massive, elaborate creation that Alice had designed and some expensive bakery had produced, Bella and Edward feeding each other small bites with appropriate ceremony, while photographers captured the moment. Edward didn't eat the cake, couldn't eat the cake, but he managed to swallow the small bite Bella offered him and hide his discomfort at consuming human food his body would later have to expel. Conversations with guests, an endless stream of congratulations and questions and curious observations. Everyone wanted to talk to the bride and groom, wanted to express their happiness or surprise or judgment depending on their perspective. Bella smiled until her face hurt and answered the same questions over and over again, while Edward remained at her side, his cold hand in hers, his presence the only thing keeping her grounded. The afternoon stretched into evening, the sun setting behind the trees that surrounded the Cullen property, and still the celebration continued. Music played constantly, couples dancing or standing in small groups, talking and laughing. The vampire guests moved among the humans with perfect ease, decades or centuries of practice allowing them to mimic human behavior so precisely that no one suspected what moved among them. Then, as the sky darkened toward true night, Jacob Black appeared at the edge of the gathering. Bella saw him first, her eyes drawn to movement in the shadows beyond the lit party space. He emerged slowly, reluctantly, his large frame tense with discomfort at being here among so many vampires. He wore clean jeans and a button-down shirt, rather than his usual cut-off shorts and t-shirt, an attempt at appropriate wedding attire that touched Bella more than she could express. Edward stiffened beside her, having heard Jacob's thoughts long before Jacob became visible. "He's here," Edward said quietly, his voice carefully neutral, despite whatever he was hearing in Jacob's mind. "I need to talk to him," Bella said. "Please." Edward's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll be close if you need me." Bella crossed the lawn to where Jacob waited, seeing the pain in his face as she approached, seeing him catalogue every detail of her appearance. The wedding dress, the ring on her finger, the happiness that must be visible in her expression despite her concern for him. This was the nightmare Jacob had been dreading, the confirmation that Bella had chosen Edward completely and irrevocably. "Hey," Bella said softly, stopping a few feet away from him. "You came?" "Yeah." Jacob's voice was rough. "Figured I should say goodbye properly. Not like last time when I just ran away like a coward." "You're not a coward," Bella said firmly. "You were hurt. That's different." Jacob's laugh was bitter. "I'm still hurt, Bella. Watching you marry him, knowing what you're planning to do after, it's killing me. But I'm here anyway because I love you and I want you to be happy even if your happiness destroys me." The raw honesty of it made Bella's chest tighten with guilt and grief. "Jake, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," Jacob said. "That almost makes it worse. If you'd been cruel or careless, I could hate you and move on. But you've always been honest with me, and that means I have to accept that this is really what you want, that is really what you want." They talked for several minutes, their conversation painful but necessary, clearing the air between them as much as possible before Bella left for her honeymoon. Jacob made her promise to tell him when she returned, made her swear she wouldn't just disappear without saying goodbye. Bella promised, even though she knew that goodbye might be years in the future after her transformation and newborn period had passed. Then Jacob asked about the honeymoon plans, and Bella made the mistake of mentioning that they would be spending several weeks alone on an island before she was changed. Jacob's expression shifted from pained acceptance to absolute horror. "Wait," he said, his voice rising. "You're going to sleep with him while you're still human? Are you insane, Bella? He could kill you." "He won't kill me," Bella said, though even she heard the uncertainty in her voice. They'd had this argument themselves, Edward's fear of hurting her, warring with Bella's determination to experience everything as a human first. "You don't know that," Jacob said, his whole body beginning to tremble with the rage that preceded phasing. "He's a vampire, Bella. He's made of stone and venom and predatory instinct. One mistake, one moment of lost control, and you're dead." "Jacob, calm down," Bella said, seeing members of the Cullen family beginning to notice the commotion. "Please, this is my choice." "It's a choice that could kill you," Jacob said, and now he was shaking violently, his temperature rising as his wolf nature rose to the surface. "I can't let you do this. I can't let him hurt you." Edward appeared at Bella's side, moving faster than human eyes could track. "She's made her decision, Jacob. I would never hurt her intentionally, and I'll be as careful as physically possible." "Your careful might not be enough," Jacob snarled. And now other members of the pack were materializing from the woods, drawn by Jacob's distress through their shared mind link. For a moment, the wedding reception teetered on the edge of violence. Vampires and werewolves facing off, old enemies separated only by treaty and the presence of human witnesses who couldn't be allowed to see what lived among them. Bella stood between Edward and Jacob, her heart racing, knowing that one wrong move could shatter the fragile peace. Then Carlyle was there, his centuries of diplomatic experience evident in his calm authority. "This is neither the time nor the place," he said quietly, his words directed at both sides. "We have a treaty. Let's honor it." Sam Yulee emerged from the shadows, the Alpha's authority visible in his posture. He looked at Jacob with an expression that commanded obedience, and slowly, reluctantly, Jacob stopped shaking. The immediate threat of phasing passed. "We're leaving," Sam said, his words meant for Carlyle. "But this isn't over. When she's changed, when she becomes one of you, we'll need to discuss the implications for the treaty." "Agreed," Carlyle said. "But tonight, let's allow them their celebration." The wolves retreated into the forest, and the vampire guests relaxed marginally. The human guests, blissfully unaware of how close they'd come to witnessing something impossible, continued their conversations and dancing as if nothing had happened. Edward pulled Bella into his arms, holding her carefully despite the tension still radiating through his body. "Are you all right?" he murmured against her hair. "I'm fine," Bella said, though her hands were shaking. "Let's just get out of here, please." Alice appeared beside them, already holding Bella's traveling clothes and wearing an expression of determined cheer. "Time for you two to leave anyway," she said brightly. "The car's ready, your luggage is packed, and your flight leaves in 3 hours. Go change, say goodbye to your parents, and get out of here before anything else goes wrong." They followed Alice's directions with relief, both of them ready to escape the complicated emotions of the reception for the privacy of their honeymoon. Bella changed out of the wedding dress with Renee's tearful help, hugged her mother and Charlie goodbye with promises to call, and allowed Edward to guide her to his car where the traditional "just married" sign had been attached to the back bumper. As they drove away from the Cullen house, Away from the party and the people and all the complications, Bella felt something release in her chest. They'd done it. They were married. The first part of their bargain was complete. Now came the honeymoon. Now came the experience of being truly together without restraint. And then, after all of that, came the transformation she'd been waiting for since the moment she'd understood what Edward truly was. Forever was beginning, and Bella couldn't wait. The journey to Isle Esme took them through 2 flights and a boat ride, each leg of the trip carrying them further from the familiar world of Forks and deeper into something that felt like a dream. Edward had been characteristically secretive about their destination, revealing only that Carlisle owned a private island off the coast of Brazil and had offered it to them for as long as they wanted. Bella had tried to picture what a vampire's private island might look like and had failed completely, her imagination inadequate to the reality that awaited them. They arrived in Rio de Janeiro as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the water of the harbour. A boat waited for them at a private dock, sleek and expensive looking, piloted by a man who greeted Edward in rapid Portuguese and carefully avoided looking too closely at either of them. Edward responded in the same language, his pronunciation flawless, and Bella was reminded again that her husband had lived long enough to accumulate skills and knowledge she could barely comprehend. Husband. The word still felt strange in her mind, weighted with significance that went beyond the simple legal designation. Edward was her husband now, bound to her by human law and vampire determination, committed to spending eternity with her once she completed her own transformation. The ring on her finger caught the fading sunlight, evidence of promises made and soon to be fulfilled. The boat carried them away from the mainland as darkness fell completely, stars emerging in the tropical sky with a brilliance Bella had never seen in cloud-covered Forks. Edward sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his cold presence a comfort against the humid warmth of the Brazilian night. He pointed out constellations as they appeared, naming them in several different languages, telling her stories about sailing by starlight in centuries past, when navigation was more art than science. After perhaps an hour, a dark shape emerged from the ocean ahead of them, silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Isle Esme, Edward said quietly, and Bella felt her breath catch as the island grew more defined. Palm trees swayed in the ocean breeze, and the white sand of the beach gleamed pale in the moonlight. A house sat back from the beach, nestled among the tropical vegetation, its windows dark, but its shape suggesting elegant architecture designed to complement rather than dominate the natural landscape. The boat pulled up to a small dock, and Edward helped Bella onto the weathered wood with unnecessary care. She was perfectly capable of walking off a boat without assistance, but she'd learned over the past year that Edward's protective instincts were part of who he was, woven too deeply into his nature to be argued away. So she accepted his hand and let him guide her along the dock toward the beach, their luggage following behind them, carried by Edward's other hand, as if the heavy bags weighed nothing at all. The sand was still warm from the day's sun, though the night had cooled the air to something approaching comfortable. Bella slipped off her shoes and felt the sand between her toes, fine and soft, and absolutely unlike the rocky beaches of the Pacific Northwest. This was paradise, she thought, isolated and beautiful and utterly private. For the next weeks, there would be no family watching them, no friends making demands, no pack of werewolves threatening violence. Just Edward and Bella, finally alone, finally free to be together without restraint. The house was even more beautiful inside than its exterior had suggested. Open and airy, with wide windows that could be thrown open to let in the ocean breeze. Furnished simply but elegantly with an eye toward comfort rather than ostentation. The master bedroom dominated the second floor, its enormous bed draped in white mosquito netting that provided an illusion of privacy despite the room's openness. French doors led to a balcony that overlooked the ocean, and Bella could hear the gentle sound of waves against the shore, providing a constant backdrop of peaceful sound. Edward set their luggage down and turned to face Bella, his expression nervous in a way she'd rarely seen. For all his centuries of existence, for all his experience and knowledge, this was new territory for him as well. He'd never been with anyone, never allowed himself the kind of physical intimacy that they were about to share, never trusted himself enough to be that vulnerable with another person. "Are you all right?" Bella asked softly, seeing the tension in his shoulders despite his attempt to appear calm. "I'm terrified," Edward admitted, the honesty stark and raw. "Bella, I could hurt you so easily. If I lose control for even a moment, if my strength overwhelms my caution, I could kill you without meaning to. How am I supposed to live with myself if I harm the person I love more than my own existence?" Bella crossed the room to stand directly in front of him, taking his cold hands in her warm ones. "You won't hurt me," she said, with more confidence than she felt. "You've had perfect control around me for over a year, Edward. You've resisted my blood when it calls to you more strongly than anyone else's. You've held me and kissed me, and never once caused me harm beyond a few bruises. Trust yourself the way I trust you." "Bruises aren't the same as broken bones," Edward said, but his grip on her hands tightened slightly, accepting the contact, accepting her faith in him. "Bella, promise me something. If I hurt you, if you feel pain or fear, you'll tell me immediately. You'll make me stop." "I promise," Bella said, meaning it, even though she suspected that her definition of acceptable pain might differ significantly from his. She'd researched this as much as possible, given the lack of available information about human-vampire physical relationships. Everything she'd found suggested it was dangerous at best, potentially fatal at worst. But Bella had spent her entire relationship with Edward accepting danger as the price of loving him, and she wasn't about to stop now. Edward pulled her closer, slowly, giving her every opportunity to retreat if she wanted. Bella met him halfway, pressing herself against his stone-hard body, feeling the cold that radiated from him like standing near ice. His lips found hers, and the kiss was gentle at first, cautious, both of them aware that they stood on the threshold of something that would change everything between them. Bella deepened the kiss, her hands moving to Edward's shirt, working at the buttons with fingers that trembled slightly from nervousness and anticipation. Edward made a sound low in his throat, somewhere between desire and concern, but he didn't pull away. Instead, his hands came up to cup her face, his touch feather-light despite the strength he could have used. They moved together toward the bed, shedding clothing with increasing urgency, Edward's caution warring with desire in ways that made him shake with the effort of control. Bella saw the tension in every line of his body, saw him fighting his nature with every breath, and she loved him more in that moment than she'd thought possible. He was terrified of hurting her, and yet he was here, trusting himself because she trusted him, giving her this experience she demanded as part of their bargain. The mosquito netting fell around them like a curtain, enclosing them in their own private world. Edward's hands traced patterns on Bella's skin, learning the geography of her body with reverent attention. His touch, careful and controlled and absolutely focused on her. Bella arched into his touch, wanting more, wanting everything, wanting to experience this completely before she transformed into something else and the experience changed forever. "I love you," Edward whispered against her throat, his cold breath making her shiver. "I love you more than I thought I could love anything. You're everything, Bella. Everything." "I love you too," Bella managed, her voice breaking on the words. "Always, forever. Don't hold back, Edward. I'm not as fragile as you think." "Yes, you are," Edward said, but his control was slipping, desire overwhelming caution, and Bella felt him finally surrender to what they both wanted. The night blurred into sensation and whispered words and moments of connection that Bella knew she would remember forever. Edward was careful, so careful, his every movement controlled and measured, but even his restraint couldn't completely mask his inhuman strength. Bella felt the pressure of his hands, the cold hardness of his body, the way he held himself back from giving her his full weight. But the discomfort was nothing compared to the joy of finally being completely with him, of experiencing this intimacy she'd waited so long for. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the wreckage of the bed, and Bella felt exhaustion pulling at her, despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. Edward held her carefully, his arms around her, his face buried in her hair. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Did I hurt you?" "I'm perfect," Bella said, meaning it absolutely. She felt bruised and tender in ways that would probably be more evident tomorrow, but in this moment, she felt complete, whole, finally, fully Edward's. She drifted towards sleep, Edward's cold arms around her, his voice murmuring endearments she barely heard. Her last conscious thought was gratitude that she'd insisted on this, on experiencing this as a human, before transformation changed everything. Bella woke to bright sunlight streaming through the open windows and the sound of waves against the shore. She was alone in the bed, the space beside her cold and empty, and for a moment panic seized her before she heard Edward's voice from the bathroom speaking quietly in Portuguese. A phone call then, dealing with some detail of their stay, or checking in with his family, or any of a dozen other mundane tasks that continued even on a honeymoon. Bella sat up slowly and immediately became aware of every place Edward's hands had gripped her during the night. Her arms bore distinct bruises in the shape of fingers. Her hips showed similar marks. Her shoulder had a bruise that looked almost like teeth marks, where Edward had buried his face against her. She looked like she'd been in a fight, her body mapped with evidence of Edward's struggle for control. But she didn't hurt, not really. The bruises were tender when she pressed them, but not painful in any significant way. Bella examined them with clinical interest, noting their placement and severity, already planning how to minimize Edward's reaction when he inevitably saw them. Edward emerged from the bathroom and froze when he saw her sitting up in bed. His eyes went immediately to the bruises visible on her arms and shoulders, and the colour drained from his already pale face. "Oh God," he whispered, his voice hollow with horror. "Bella, I hurt you. I did exactly what I was afraid of doing." "You didn't hurt me," Bella said quickly, but Edward was already crossing the room, his hands hovering over her bruises without quite touching them, cataloguing the damage he'd done. "Look at you," Edward said, his voice breaking. "Look what I did to you. I lost control, and now you're covered in bruises. Bella, I could have killed you. I came so close to being too rough, to holding too tight, to forgetting my own strength." "But you didn't," Bella insisted. "Edward, these are just bruises. They don't even hurt. I'm completely fine." But Edward was shaking his head, backing away from her as if she were the dangerous one, as if proximity to her might cause him to lose control again. "I can't do this," he said. "I can't touch you again while you're human. The risk is too great. I won't be responsible for seriously harming you, Bella. I won't." The determination in his voice made Bella's stomach sink. "Edward, please, don't do this. Last night was perfect. I don't care about a few bruises." "I care," Edward said, and now his voice had gone cold with the absolute certainty that meant he'd made a decision that no amount of arguing would change. "I care that I hurt you, even minimally. I care that I could have done so much worse. And I care enough to keep you safe from myself, even if that means denying us both something we want." He turned and walked out onto the balcony, leaving Bella alone in the bed, her perfect morning ruined by Edward's self-recrimination. She looked down at the bruises again, these marks that Edward saw as evidence of his monstrosity, and she saw as evidence of finally being fully his. The next days settled into a frustrating pattern. Edward was attentive and loving in every way except physical intimacy. They swam together in the warm ocean water, explored the island's interior with its lush tropical vegetation, lay on the beach talking for hours about everything and nothing. Edward cooked elaborate meals for Bella that he couldn't share, brought her tropical fruits she'd never tasted, created a honeymoon that was perfect in every way, except the one that mattered most to her. But he wouldn't touch her. Not beyond the most chaste kisses, not beyond holding her hand or putting his arm around her shoulders. Any attempt Bella made to initiate more was gently but firmly refused, Edward's guilt and fear outweighing his desire no matter how much Bella argued or pleaded. "This isn't fair," Bella said on the 5th day, her frustration finally boiling over. "You're punishing us both for something that wasn't even a problem." "It was a problem," Edward said quietly. "Those bruises were evidence that I'm too dangerous for you while you're human. After you're changed, after you're strong enough to withstand my strength, then we can be together without restraint. But until then, I need to protect you from myself." "I don't need protection from you," Bella argued, but she knew she'd already lost this battle. Edward had made his decision, and his guilt was too strong to be argued away. So Bella tried a different approach. She wore the revealing swimsuits Alice had packed, hoping to tempt Edward beyond his control. She initiated contact constantly, small touches and lingering kisses that she hoped would build into more. She even attempted outright seduction one night, emerging from the shower, wearing nothing but a towel, and giving Edward her most sultry look. Edward saw through all of it, of course. He could read her intent, if not her thoughts, could see her attempts at manipulation for what they were. But Bella thought she saw his resolve weakening, saw him struggle more each day to maintain his determination. It gave her hope that eventually, before the honeymoon ended, she might convince him to be with her again. But Edward's control held, and the days continued in their pattern of perfect intimacy in every way except the one Bella wanted most. She tried to be patient, tried to enjoy what they had, rather than mourning what Edward had denied them. But frustration grew beneath the surface of her contentment, a low-grade resentment that she tried to hide, but suspected Edward sensed anyway. The island was paradise, and Bella was spending it feeling rejected by the person who loved her most. It wasn't how she'd imagined her honeymoon would be. 2 weeks into their honeymoon, Bella woke with the uncomfortable realization that something was wrong with her body. Not wrong in the way that suggested illness or injury, but wrong in the subtle way that meant her internal rhythms had shifted in some way she couldn't immediately identify. She lay still in the bed for several minutes, Edward's cold arm draped across her waist, trying to pinpoint what felt different. Then it hit her with the force of certainty. She was late. Her period, which had been expected nearly a week ago, hadn't arrived. Bella's cycles had never been perfectly regular, stress and change often throwing off her timing by days or even weeks. The wedding and the travel and the emotional intensity of the past month would have been more than enough to disrupt her normal patterns. There was no reason to think this meant anything significant, except that Bella knew, with an instinct that bypassed rational thought entirely, that this was significant. This wasn't stress or travel or any of the normal disruptions that occasionally delayed her cycle. This was something else, something impossible. She carefully extracted herself from Edward's embrace, moving slowly so as not to wake him, despite knowing that his vampire senses would register her movement regardless of how quietly she tried to manage it. But Edward remained still, either truly asleep in whatever state passed for vampiress, or pretending to be asleep to give her privacy. Bella grabbed clothes and retreated to the bathroom, her mind racing through possibilities she knew made no sense. Pregnancy. The word felt absurd even thinking it. Vampires couldn't have children. Edward had explained this to her months ago when they'd first discussed the physical aspects of their relationship. His body was frozen, unchanging, animated by venom rather than blood. Nothing about his biology should allow for reproduction. It was one of the many costs of vampirehood, one of the things given up in exchange for immortality and strength. But Edward wasn't entirely frozen, Bella thought, as she splashed water on her face and stared at her reflection in the mirror. His body functioned in ways that suggested some processes continued even after transformation. Venom moved through him in patterns similar to blood flow. He could consume human food if necessary, though his body would reject it later. And they'd been intimate, which meant some aspects of human reproduction remained physically possible even if conception shouldn't be. Bella pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling nothing different, no physical evidence of the possibility that was taking root in her mind. But she knew, somehow, despite all the biological impossibilities, despite Edward's certainty that this couldn't happen, Bella knew with absolute conviction that she was pregnant. The impossibility of it made her head spin. A human woman carrying a vampire's child, or half-vampire child, she supposed, if the baby was even viable. What would something like that even be? What would grow inside her fed by her human blood, but created from vampire venom. The questions multiplied faster than she could process them, each one more terrifying and wonderful than the last. She needed to be certain before she told Edward, needed to confirm what her instincts were screaming at her before she spoke the words aloud and made this real. But pregnancy tests didn't exist on a private island in the middle of the ocean. There would be no quick stop at a pharmacy, no discreet purchase that would give her definitive answers. She would have to rely on her body's signals, on the symptoms that would either confirm or deny what she suspected. Over the next days, Bella paid careful attention to every sensation, every change, every hint that something was different. The fatigue came first, a bone-deep exhaustion that sleeping didn't touch. She found herself napping in the afternoons, something she never did. Her body demanding rest in ways that felt foreign and urgent. Edward noticed, of course, his concern evident in the way he watched her sleep, the way he asked repeatedly if she was feeling ill. Just tired, Bella said each time, because what else could she say? I think I might be pregnant with your impossible baby. The words wouldn't come, fear and uncertainty keeping them locked behind her teeth. The food aversions started next. Chicken, which she'd always enjoyed, suddenly smelled wrong in ways that made her stomach turn. Edward had grilled some for dinner on their 15th day on the island, and Bella had barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting violently. Edward had been beside her immediately, his cold hand on her forehead, his voice tight with worry. You're sick, he said. We need to get you to a doctor. There's a clinic in Rio. We can be there in a few hours. I'm not sick, Bella said, though she wasn't entirely certain of that. It's probably just something I ate. Food poisoning or a stomach bug. I'll be fine. But she wasn't fine. The nausea returned sporadically over the next days, usually in the mornings, but sometimes triggered by specific smells or foods. Bella forced herself to eat anyway, knowing she needed to maintain her strength, but every meal became a battle against her rebellious stomach. Her body was changing in other subtle ways too. Her breasts felt tender, swollen in a way that had nothing to do with her cycle. Her sense of smell seemed heightened, making Edward's naturally sweet scent almost overwhelming at times. And beneath it all was a certainty that grew stronger with each passing day, an absolute knowledge that something was growing inside her, something that shouldn't exist, but did anyway. On the morning of the 18th day, Bella woke knowing she couldn't keep this to herself any longer. The secret was too large, too important, too potentially catastrophic to carry alone. She needed to tell Edward, needed to share this burden even knowing it would terrify him, would probably send him into a spiral of guilt and self-recrimination that would dwarf his reaction to the bruises. She found him on the beach, standing at the edge of the water where the waves lapped at his bare feet. He looked like a statue carved from marble, absolutely still, his golden eyes fixed on the horizon. Bella approached slowly, her heart pounding hard enough that she knew he could hear it, her scent carrying, her nervousness to his enhanced senses. "Edward," she said quietly, and he turned immediately, his expression shifting from contemplative to concerned the moment he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, closing the distance between them in less than a second. "Bella, you look terrified. What happened?" "I need to call Carlisle," Bella said, the words tumbling out before she could second guess them. I need to talk to him right now. It's important. Edward's eyes narrowed, reading things in her expression that she couldn't hide even if she wanted to. Why do you need Carlisle? Bella, tell me what's wrong. Are you hurt? Are you sick? I'm pregnant, Bella said, and the words hung in the air between them like something physical and impossible. Edward stared at her for several seconds, his face completely blank, his mind clearly struggling to process what she'd just said. Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound without humor. That's not possible. Bella, vampires can't reproduce. My body doesn't work that way. You're probably just late because of stress. The wedding and the travel and everything else would be more than enough to disrupt your cycle. I know it's not possible, Bella said. I know all the biological reasons why this can't be happening. But Edward, I'm telling you that it is happening. I'm pregnant. I can feel it. My body's changing in ways that have nothing to do with stress. She watched understanding slowly dawn on Edward's face, watched horror replace confusion, watched him go from denial to terrified acceptance in the space of seconds. His hand came up to cover his mouth, and for the first time since she'd known him, Bella saw Edward look genuinely shaken. Oh God, he whispered. Oh God, Bella, what have I done? You haven't done anything wrong, Bella said firmly, though her own fear was making it hard to sound convincing. This is just something that happened, something impossible that's real anyway. But I need to talk to Carlisle. I need medical advice from someone who understands vampire biology. Please, Edward, call him. Edward's hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone, and Bella realized with a jolt that she'd never seen him shake before, never seen him lose control of his body's stillness. He dialed with fingers that fumbled on the keys, and when Carlisle answered, Edward's voice was rough with barely controlled panic. Carlisle, something's happened. Something impossible. Bella thinks she's pregnant. Bella couldn't hear Carlisle's response, but she watched Edward's face as he listened, watched him flinch at whatever his father was saying. The conversation lasted several minutes, Edward asking questions in a voice that grew progressively more strained, his free hand gripping Bella's with enough force that she felt her bones grind together, though she didn't complain. Finally, Edward ended the call and looked at Bella with eyes that held more fear than she'd ever seen in them. Carlisle says it's theoretically possible, rare, almost unheard of, but not completely impossible. Male vampires retain some reproductive capability if they were changed shortly after puberty, when those systems were fully developed. My venom moves through my body in patterns similar to blood flow, which means it could potentially carry reproductive cells, even though they shouldn't be viable. So I really am pregnant, Bella said, and saying it aloud made it feel real in ways that thinking it hadn't. With a half-vampire baby. If you are, it's incredibly dangerous, Edward said, his voice tight. Carlisle has heard of only a handful of cases like this in his 3 centuries. Most of them ended with the mother's death. The fetus grows too quickly, is too strong, does too much damage from the inside. Bella, we need to go home immediately. We need to get you to Carlisle so he can examine you properly and determine how far along you are and what we're dealing with. The urgency in Edward's voice made Bella's fear spike higher, but beneath the terror was something else. Something fierce and protective and absolutely certain. If she was pregnant, if there was a baby growing inside her that was half Edward and half herself. Then she would protect it with everything she had, no matter what it cost her. "Okay," Bella said, "let's go home." Edward was already moving, already mentally cataloguing what needed to be done. Pack their things, arrange the boat back to the mainland, book flights home, get Bella to Carlisle as quickly as physically possible. He moved through the tasks with mechanical efficiency, while Bella stood on the beach, feeling her hand rest protectively over her still flat stomach. Inside her, impossibly, something was growing. Something that shouldn't exist but did. Something that was already changing everything. And despite the fear and the danger and the absolute uncertainty of what came next, Bella felt a fierce joy blooming alongside the terror. This was their child, hers and Edward's, the product of an impossible love that had already defied every odd stacked against it. If their love could survive everything else, maybe it could survive this too. The journey back to Forks felt endless, despite Edward's determination to complete it as quickly as physically possible. They flew from Rio to Seattle on the first available flight, Edward's supernatural influence somehow securing seats on a plane that had been fully booked hours before. Bella slept through most of the journey, exhaustion pulling at her despite her attempts to stay awake. And each time she woke, she found Edward watching her with an expression that combined love and terror in equal measure. He barely spoke during the flights and the layover, his attention fixed entirely on monitoring Bella's condition, listening to her heartbeat and breathing with the intense focus of someone waiting for disaster. Bella wanted to reassure him, wanted to tell him that she felt fine despite the fatigue and occasional nausea, but the words dried up in her throat every time she saw the absolute fear in his golden eyes. From Seattle, they drove straight to the Cullen house rather than stopping at Charlie's place first. Bella would need to call her father soon, would need to fabricate some excuse for cutting the honeymoon short. But that could wait until after Carlisle had examined her and they understood what they were actually dealing with. Right now, medical assessment took priority over maintaining normal appearances. The Cullen house appeared through the trees exactly as Bella remembered it. All glass and pale wood and elegant architecture that seemed to grow organically from the forest around it. But as they pulled into the driveway, Bella saw the entire family gathered on the front porch waiting for them, and the gravity of the situation hit her with fresh force. This wasn't just about her and Edward anymore. This impossible pregnancy affected the entire family, potentially threatened their carefully maintained secrecy, possibly violated laws Bella didn't fully understand. Edward helped her from the car with excessive care, his cold hand supporting her elbow as if she might collapse without assistance. Bella wanted to protest that she was perfectly capable of walking on her own, but one look at Edward's face convinced her that arguing would be pointless. He needed to feel like he was protecting her, needed the illusion of control in a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond anyone's ability to manage. Carlisle descended the porch steps with the calm efficiency that characterized everything he did, his medical training evident in the way he approached Bella with professional assessment, rather than emotional reaction. But Bella could see concern in his golden eyes, could read the tension in his shoulders despite his attempt to appear confident and capable. "Bella," Carlisle said gently, taking her other arm and guiding her toward the house. "Let's get you inside and examined. Edward told me your symptoms, but I need to see for myself what we're dealing with before we can make any decisions about next steps." Inside, the living room had been transformed into something resembling a medical examination room. An ultrasound machine sat in the corner, its presence jarring against the elegant furniture and artwork. A hospital bed had been set up near the windows, complete with monitoring equipment that Bella recognized from her various emergency room visits over the past 2 years. Carlyle had clearly been preparing for this since Edward's phone call from the island, gathering everything he might need to properly assess an impossible pregnancy. The family hovered near the edges of the room, all of them watching Bella, with expressions that ranged from concern to fascination, to something darker that Bella couldn't quite identify. Alice stood closest, her pixie features tight with frustration that suggested her visions were giving her nothing useful. Jasper remained, near the back, his empathic gift no doubt overwhelmed by the emotional turbulence filling the house. Emmett looked uncomfortable, his usual humor absent in the face of something he couldn't joke away. Esme's expression was purely maternal concern, her gentle nature aching at the danger Bella faced. And Rosalie stood apart from the others, her spectacular beauty somehow more intense than usual, her golden eyes fixed on Bella with an expression that held wonder and fierce protectiveness. Of all the reactions Bella had anticipated, Rosalie's obvious emotional investment in this pregnancy hadn't been among them. "Everyone out," Carlyle said firmly but gently. "I need to examine Bella privately. Edward can stay, but the rest of you need to give us space." The family filed out reluctantly, though Bella noticed Rosalie lingering in the doorway until Emmett physically guided her away. Then it was just Bella, Edward, and Carlyle in the makeshift examination room, the ultrasound machine humming softly in the background. Carlyle helped Bella onto the hospital bed, his touch professional and impersonal, despite the personal nature of the situation. "I'm going to do a physical examination first," he explained, his voice calm and measured. "Check your vital signs, assess your overall condition. Then we'll do an ultrasound to see what's actually happening internally. Is that acceptable?" "Yes," Bella said, her voice smaller than she'd intended. "Whatever you need to do." The physical examination revealed what Bella already suspected. Her blood pressure was slightly elevated, her heart rate faster than normal, her body already showing signs of stress from whatever was growing inside her. Carlyle palpated her abdomen with gentle fingers, his expression growing more concerned as he felt something that shouldn't be there after only 2 weeks of pregnancy. "You're showing already," Carlyle said quietly. "There's definite abdominal distension that goes beyond normal bloating. Whatever is growing is developing much faster than a human pregnancy would. Bella, this confirms that we're dealing with something unprecedented, a hybrid of human and vampire that follows its own developmental timeline." Edward made a sound low in his throat, somewhere between a growl and a whimper, and Bella reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers with careful control, cold and strong and trembling slightly with the force of his emotion. The ultrasound came next. Carlyle squirted gel onto Bella's exposed stomach and positioned the wand with practiced efficiency, his eyes fixed on the screen as images began to appear. Bella turned her head to look at the monitor, desperate to see what was inside her, desperate to understand what she was carrying. The image that appeared made her breath catch. There was something there, definitely something. A shape that didn't quite look like the typical ultrasound images she'd seen in books and movies. The fetus was surrounded by something that resembled an amniotic sac, but appeared denser, thicker, as if the membrane protecting it was reinforced beyond normal human standards. And the fetus itself was larger than it should be, more developed than 2 weeks of pregnancy could possibly produce. There, Carlyle said, pointing to a flickering on the screen. That's the heartbeat, strong and fast, much faster than a human fetal heartbeat, but not quite as fast as an adult human heart. Somewhere in between, which makes sense given the hybrid nature of the pregnancy. Bella stared at the screen, watching the rapid flutter that meant her baby's heart was beating, that this impossible thing inside her was alive and growing and real. The fierce protectiveness she'd felt on the island intensified into something almost painful. A maternal instinct so strong it overrode every rational concern about danger or impossibility. "How far along would you estimate?" Edward asked, his voice tight. "Based on the development you're seeing." "If this were a normal human pregnancy, I'd say 8 to 10 weeks based on the fetal size," Carlyle said carefully. "But given that we know conception occurred approximately 2 weeks ago, this fetus is developing at roughly 4 to 5 times normal human speed. If that rate continues, Bella, you're looking at a full-term pregnancy in approximately 4 to 5 weeks, rather than 9 months. The timeline made Bella's head spin. 4 to 5 weeks until birth. 4 to 5 weeks of accelerated growth, of her body trying to accommodate something that was developing at an inhuman pace. 4 to 5 weeks before she would meet this baby that was already changing everything. "What about the danger to Bella?" Edward demanded. "Carlyle, you said most of these pregnancies kill the mother. What are we looking at here? What are the specific risks?" Carlyle set down the ultrasound wand and turned to face them both, his expression grave. "The fetus is partially vampire, which means it has strength and durability that exceeds human norms. As it grows, it will put increasing pressure on Bella's internal organs. Her ribs are at risk of fracturing. Her pelvis may not be able to accommodate the birth. There's significant risk of internal bleeding, organ damage, and complications during delivery that could be fatal." "Then we end it," Edward said immediately, his voice hard. "We terminate the pregnancy before it can hurt Bella any further. That's the only rational choice." "No," Bella said, the word coming out with absolute certainty. "No, Edward, I'm not terminating this pregnancy. This is our baby, yours and mine. I'm not giving up on it before we've even tried to find a way through this." "Bella, you could die," Edward said, his voice breaking. "This thing inside you could kill you from the inside out. I won't allow that. I can't lose you." "It's not your choice," Bella said firmly, meeting his eyes directly. "This is my body and my baby and my decision. I know it's dangerous. I know I could die, but I'm choosing to take that risk because this child is worth it to me. Our child is worth it." "You're not thinking clearly," Edward said desperately. "You're being irrational. Bella, please, listen to Carlyle. Listen to the medical reality of what you're facing." "I am listening," Bella said. "I hear everything he's saying. I understand the risks, and I'm choosing to continue this pregnancy anyway, because some things are worth dying for, Edward. You taught me that yourself. The silence that followed was broken only by the quiet hum of medical equipment and the distant sounds of the family in other parts of the house. Edward stared at Bella with an expression of such anguish that she almost relented, almost agreed to do what he wanted just to erase that pain from his face. But beneath her sympathy was a core of absolute determination that wouldn't be moved. This was their child, the product of an impossible love that had already overcome every obstacle placed in its path. And Bella would protect it with everything she had, even if that protection cost her life. There may be ways to mitigate the risks, Carlyle said carefully, breaking the tense silence. If the fetus is part vampire, it may have dietary needs that differ from human norms. If we can meet those needs, it might reduce the damage being done to Bella's body, and we can monitor closely, be prepared for every possible complication, maximize Bella's chances of surviving both the pregnancy and the delivery. You're talking about keeping her alive long enough to give birth and then transforming her immediately after, Edward said flatly. That's the only way this ends with Bella surviving, isn't it? She carries this thing to term, delivers it somehow, and then I have to change her while she's dying from the trauma. Possibly, Carlyle admitted. I won't lie to you, Edward. The odds are not in Bella's favor. But if she's determined to continue the pregnancy, then our job is to support her and do everything possible to ensure the best possible outcome for both her and the baby. The baby, Edward repeated bitterly. You're already thinking of it as a baby rather than a thing that's killing the woman I love. It is a baby. Rosalie's voice came from the doorway, where she'd apparently been listening despite Carlyle's instruction for everyone to leave. It's Bella and Edward's baby, and it deserves a chance to live just like any other child. Stay out of this, Rosalie, Edward snarled, his control finally slipping into outright hostility. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, Rosalie said, moving into the room with determined grace. I never got to have children, Edward. That choice was stolen from me when I was changed. But Bella has been given a miracle, an impossible gift, and you want to destroy it because you're afraid. You're a coward. Edward lunged toward Rosalie with inhuman speed, but Emmett appeared between them just as quickly, his massive hands holding Edward back. Easy, brother, Emmett said quietly. Rose doesn't mean it. She's just emotional. I do mean it, Rosalie said, her eyes blazing. Bella wants this baby. It's her choice, her body, her decision. And I'm going to help her protect it, whether Edward approves or not. The room erupted into argument, voices overlapping as the family took sides, as alliances formed and broke around the impossible question of what to do about Bella's pregnancy. Through it all, Bella sat on the hospital bed, with Carlyle's hand on her shoulder, watching her new family fracture over the choice she'd made. But beneath the chaos and the fear and the anger, Bella felt the tiny flutter of movement in her belly, so subtle she almost missed it, so faint it could have been imagination, but real nonetheless. The baby moving, their baby, hers and Edward's, alive and growing and already fighting for existence. And Bella knew with absolute certainty that she would fight just as hard to protect it, no matter what anyone else thought, no matter what it cost her. This was her choice, and she was making it. Jacob Black had been running as a wolf for 3 months straight, pushing himself deeper into the wilderness of Canada and Alaska, trying to outrun the memory of Bella Swan in a wedding dress walking down an aisle towards someone else. The pack mind link had been blessedly silent for weeks, the distance between him and La Push stretching the mental connection thin enough that he existed in a kind of peaceful isolation. No thoughts but his own. No constant awareness of his brother's emotions and concerns, just a simple clarity of wolf existence focused on hunting and running and surviving. But isolation couldn't last forever. Eventually, homesickness pulled him back south. A need to see his father and his pack brothers overwhelming the desire to avoid the pain that Forks represented. Jacob crossed back into Washington in the early morning hours, his massive russet wolf form covering ground with inhuman speed. And the moment he entered the range of the pack mind link, Sam Yuli's consciousness slammed into his with the force of a physical blow. Jacob, Sam's mental voice carried both relief and concern. You need to come home. There's been a development with the Cullens, something that affects the treaty. What kind of development? Jacob thought back, his paws slowing their relentless pace. Come to the boundary line. We need to talk. And this isn't a conversation for the mind link where everyone can hear. Jacob changed direction, heading toward the invisible line that separated Quileute land from the territory the treaty granted to the Cullens. He found Sam waiting there in human form, along with Paul and Jared, all of them wearing expressions that combine anger and disgust in ways that made Jacob Wolf instincts prickle with warning. Jacob phased back to human, his body reforming with the familiar uncomfortable sensation of bones and muscles rearranging themselves. What's going on? He asked without preamble. What did the Cullens do? It's Bella, Sam said, his voice tight with controlled fury. She came back from the honeymoon early. She's at the Cullen house right now. Relief flooded through Jacob despite his best efforts to suppress it. Bella was back, which meant she was still human, which meant Edward hadn't changed her yet. Jacob had been dreading the day when he would sense Bella's transformation through the pack mind, when he would know she'd surrendered her humanity for Edward Cullen's cold eternity. If she was back early, maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe there was still hope. Why did they come back early? Jacob asked. Is she okay? She's pregnant, Paul snarled before Sam could answer. The leech knocked her up, and now she's carrying some kind of abomination inside her. A half-vampire thing that shouldn't exist. The words hit Jacob like a physical blow, so impossible that his mind rejected them instantly. That's not possible. Vampires can't reproduce. They're dead. Their bodies don't work that way. Apparently this one's does, Sam said grimly. We don't know all the details, but we know Bella is pregnant with Edward Cullen's child. And we know that child is part vampire, which makes it a threat under the terms of our treaty. A threat, Jacob repeated, his voice hollow. You're calling Bella's baby a threat. We're calling a half-vampire creature a threat, Sam corrected. Because that's what it is, Jacob. An unknown quantity that could become dangerous. Our treaty with the Cullens is clear. They don't bite humans. They don't create new vampires on our land. And they don't threaten the tribe. This pregnancy violates the spirit of that treaty, even if it doesn't violate the letter. So what are you planning to do? Jacob asked, though he already knew the answer and felt sick with the knowing. The pack has voted, Sam said, and the formality in his voice told Jacob this was an alpha command rather than a request. The half-vampire child must be destroyed before it's born. We can't allow something that dangerous to exist so close to the reservation. Can't risk it becoming a threat to our people. You're talking about killing Bella's baby, Jacob said, his voice rising with barely controlled rage. You're planning to murder an unborn child. We're planning to eliminate a potential threat, Paul said harshly, before it has a chance to hurt anyone. That thing inside Bella isn't human, Jacob. It's part vampire, which makes it our enemy under the treaty. And Bella, Jacob demanded, what happens to her when you kill her baby? You think she's just going to accept that? You think she won't fight to protect her own child? Collateral damage, Paul said with brutal honesty. If Bella gets in the way, if the Cullens defend her, we do what we have to do. The tribe's safety comes first. The words triggered something primal in Jacob, a rage so intense that he felt his body beginning to phase without conscious decision. You're talking about killing Bella, he snarled, his voice already distorting as his wolf nature rose to the surface. The girl I love, the girl who's never done anything to hurt any of us. And you want to kill her because she's pregnant with a baby she chose to have. Jacob, stand down, Sam commanded, and the alpha order hit Jacob's wolf like a physical restraint, forcing his phase to halt mid-transformation. I know you have feelings for Bella. Everyone knows. But those feelings can't be allowed to compromise the safety of the tribe. This is bigger than your personal attachment to a human girl. She's not just some human girl, Jacob said, fighting against the Alpha Command with every bit of willpower he possessed. She's Bella, and I won't let you hurt her. You don't have a choice, Sam said, though sympathy flickered in his eyes. I'm ordering you as Alpha to stand down and accept the Pack's decision. We attack the Cullen house tonight. We destroy the half-vampire before it can be born. Those are my orders. And Jacob felt the command settle into his bones, felt the Alpha's will trying to force his compliance, felt the Pack hierarchy demanding his obedience. But beneath the supernatural compulsion was something stronger. The knowledge that Bella was in danger, that the Pack planned to hurt her, that he was being ordered to stand aside and let it happen. Jacob had been born with alpha blood in his veins. His great-grandfather Ephraim Black had been alpha before Sam's grandfather, and that legacy lived in Jacob's genes, even though he'd never chosen to claim it. The power to refuse Sam's commands, to break from the Pack entirely, to become alpha of his own Pack if necessary. It was a birthright he'd never wanted, a responsibility he'd spent years avoiding. But Bella's life hung in the balance, and for Bella, Jacob would claim the authority he'd been running from. No, Jacob said, and the word carried power that made Sam's eyes widen in shock. I refuse your command, Sam. I claim my birthright as Alpha. I'm breaking from your Pack. The sensation was immediate and devastating. The Pack mind link stretched and snapped like a rubber band pulled too tight. Jacob's consciousness suddenly isolated from his brothers in ways that felt like losing limbs. He could no longer sense their thoughts or emotions, could no longer feel their presence as a constant background awareness. He was alone inside his own head for the first time since his first phase, and the silence was both terrifying and liberating. Jacob, no, Sam said, his voice rough with emotion. Don't do this. Don't break the Pack over a human girl. She's not just a human girl, Jacob repeated. She's Bella, and I'm going to protect her whether you approve or not. He phased immediately, his wolf form exploding out of his human skin, and ran toward the Cullen house with desperate speed. Behind him, he heard Sam giving orders, heard the pack preparing to follow. But Jacob had seconds of advantage, and he intended to use them. The Cullen house appeared through the trees, all glass and elegant architecture that felt wrong to Jacob's wolf senses. He phased back to human as he reached the porch, not bothering with clothing, his body covered only in the cut-off shorts that survived the transformation. The door opened before he could knock. Edward Cullen standing in the doorway with an expression that combined surprise and understanding. "Jacob," Edward said quietly, "I heard you coming. I heard what happened with Sam." "Where's Bella?" Jacob demanded. "I need to see her. I need to know she's okay." "She's resting," Edward said, not moving from the doorway. "Jacob, you can't be here. Your presence will only make things worse when the pack arrives." "I'm not part of Sam's pack anymore," Jacob said. "I broke away. I claimed my alpha birthright, and I'm here to protect Bella from anyone who tries to hurt her, including my former brothers." Understanding dawned in Edward's golden eyes, followed by something that might have been respect. "You broke from your pack for her," Edward said, "even knowing what it would cost you." "I love her," Jacob said simply. "I'm not going to let anyone hurt her. Not Sam, not Paul, not anyone." Movement in the house behind Edward drew Jacob's attention. Seth Clearwater appeared, looking young and uncertain, followed by Leah Clearwater, her expression bitter and resentful. Both of them were phasing, their bodies shifting between human and wolf as they struggled with some internal decision. "We're coming with you," Seth said, his voice cracking with emotion. "We heard everything through the pack mind, heard you break away, and we're following you. You're our alpha now, Jacob." "Seth, no," Jacob said, horror mixing with gratitude. "You don't have to do this. You have a family, a life with the pack. Don't throw it away for me." "You're not throwing your life away for Bella," Seth said stubbornly. "You're protecting someone you love. That's what real pack does. We protect each other and the people who matter to us. So we're with you." Leah said nothing, but her presence spoke volumes. She'd followed her younger brother into this impossible situation, unwilling to let Seth face it alone, even though her own loyalties clearly remain conflicted. The sound of approaching wolves made everyone tense. Sam's pack was coming, drawn by the scent of trespassers on Cullen land, ready to enforce the decision to destroy Bella's baby, regardless of who stood in their way. "Get inside," Edward said, stepping back from the door. "All of you. We need to present a united front when they arrive." Jacob followed Edward into the Cullen house, Seth and Leah close behind him, and found Bella sitting on a couch surrounded by Edward's family. She looked terrible, pale and drawn, and showing far more than 2 weeks of pregnancy should have produced. But when she saw Jacob, her face lit up with genuine joy that made his heart ache. "Jake," she said softly, "you came back. I heard you were in trouble," Jacob said, crossing the room to kneel beside her. "I wasn't going to let anything happen to you, Bells. Not even if it meant breaking from my pack." Bella's eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have sacrificed everything for me." "You're worth it," Jacob said simply, taking her warm hand in his larger one. "You've always been worth it." Outside, Sam's pack surrounded the house, their wolf forms massive and threatening in the fading daylight. And inside, an impossible alliance formed. Vampires and werewolves standing together, united by their determination to protect one human girl and the impossible baby she carried. The treaty was broken. War was coming, and Jacob had chosen his side without hesitation or regret. For Bella, he would face anything, even his own brothers. The days that followed Jacob's defection from Sam's pack settled into a tense routine that felt like waiting for an inevitable disaster. Sam's wolves maintained constant surveillance around the Cullen property, their massive forms visible at the tree line during the day and their howls echoing through the forest at night. They didn't attack, held back by some combination of treaty obligation and the knowledge that Jacob's small pack would defend the house with their lives. But their presence was a constant reminder that peace was temporary, that eventually something would shift and violence would become unavoidable. Inside the house, Bella's condition deteriorated with frightening speed. Each morning brought new evidence of the pregnancy's toll on her body, new signs that the half-vampire fetus growing inside her was destroying her from within. Carlyle examined her twice daily, documenting the progression with clinical precision, even as his expression grew increasingly concerned. The baby was growing exponentially faster than any human pregnancy. By the end of the first week back in Forks, Bella looked 6 months pregnant, despite conception occurring less than a month ago. Her stomach was huge and distended, pressing against her internal organs in ways that made breathing difficult and eating nearly impossible. The skin stretched tight across her belly showed bruises in patterns that suggested internal damage, places where the baby had kicked or pressed with inhuman strength. Bella's ribs began to crack on the 10th day. She woke screaming in the middle of the night. Edward at her side instantly, Carlyle rushing to assess the damage. 3 ribs on her right side had fractured, broken by the pressure of the rapidly growing fetus. Carlyle wrapped her torso in compression bandages and administered pain medication that barely touched the constant ache, but there was nothing he could do to prevent additional fractures as the baby continued to grow. The pain was constant now, a baseline of discomfort, punctuated by sharp spikes when the baby moved or kicked. Bella tried to hide how much she was hurting, tried to smile, and insist she was fine whenever Edward looked at her with anguished eyes. But her body betrayed her with every careful movement, every shallow breath, every wince she couldn't quite suppress. Edward was slowly being destroyed by watching her suffer. He barely left her side, maintaining constant vigil, as if his presence alone could protect her from the damage being done. He'd stopped sleeping entirely, though vampires didn't truly need sleep anyway. Instead, he sat beside Bella's bed through the long nights, holding her hand with careful gentleness, listening to her heartbeat and the secondary heartbeat that came from the baby, hearing both and hating himself for causing this. His guilt was palpable, a living thing that filled the house with tension. He blamed himself absolutely for Bella's condition, saw himself as the monster who'd impregnated her with something that was killing her. No amount of reassurance from Bella or his family could penetrate the wall of self-loathing he'd built around himself. "This is my fault," Edward said repeatedly, his voice hollow with despair. "I did this to her. I'm killing the person I love more than anything in existence, and I can't stop it. I can't save her." "You're not killing me," Bella insisted every time, though her voice grew weaker as the days passed. This baby is not your fault, Edward. This is something we created together, something I chose to keep. Don't blame yourself for my choice. But Edward couldn't hear her, couldn't accept forgiveness for something he saw as unforgivable. His mind was consumed with finding ways to end the pregnancy, to save Bella from the thing destroying her. He researched constantly, reading every medical text in Carlisle's extensive library, searching for some precedent or procedure that might allow them to remove the baby safely. But there was nothing. The membrane surrounding the fetus was too strong for surgical instruments, too reinforced to be cut without tools that would also damage Bella beyond repair. They were trapped, committed to seeing this nightmare through to whatever ending awaited them. Rosalie became Bella's primary caretaker, a development that surprised everyone, including Bella herself. The beautiful vampire who'd resented Bella's presence in their family transformed into a fierce protector, attending to Bella's needs with gentle efficiency that bordered on maternal. She helped Bella bathe when standing became too difficult. She changed bandages and administered medications, and sat with Bella during the long afternoons when Edward needed to hunt to maintain his control around Bella's blood. The unlikely friendship that formed between them was based on shared understanding of sacrifice and choice. Rosalie had never been given the choice to become a vampire, had never been asked if she wanted immortality or was willing to surrender her humanity. But Bella was choosing, was actively deciding that this baby was worth dying for, and Rosalie respected that determination, even as she grieved what it cost. "You're so brave," Rosalie said one afternoon, brushing Bella's hair with careful strokes. "Braver than I ever was. You know what this might cost you, and you're facing it without flinching." "I'm flinching plenty," Bella admitted, her voice strained. "I'm terrified, Rose, but I'm also certain. This baby is mine and Edward's, and I'll protect it with everything I have." "I know," Rosalie said softly. "I see it in you. The kind of love that makes any sacrifice worthwhile. I wish I'd had that. I wish I'd been given the chance to be a mother before everything was taken from me." The conversation revealed depths to Rosalie that Bella had never suspected, showed her a woman who mourned lost possibilities with an intensity that centuries hadn't diminished. And Bella understood why Rosalie had allied with her so quickly and completely. This baby represented everything Rosalie could never have, and she would protect it as fiercely as if it were her own. On the 12th day, Bella's body rejected regular food entirely. Everything she tried to eat came back up within minutes, her stomach unable to handle normal nutrition. She grew weaker rapidly, her body consuming itself trying to support the pregnancy. And Carlisle's expression grew grimmer as he catalogued her declining vital signs. "She needs nutrition," Carlisle said to Edward during one of their whispered conferences that they thought Bella couldn't hear. "Her body is cannibalizing muscle tissue for energy. If we can't find a way to get calories into her, she'll be too weak to survive the delivery." It was Jacob who suggested blood, though he meant it as a dark joke. "The thing's half vampire, right?" he said from his position near Bella's bedside, where he'd maintained almost constant presence since breaking from Sam's pack. "Maybe it needs blood instead of regular food. Maybe that's why Bella can't keep anything down." Suggestion hung in the air for a long moment, everyone processing the horrible logic of it. The baby was part vampire. Vampires survived on blood. Perhaps the fetus needed blood to thrive, and Bella's body was rejecting everything else because it wasn't what the baby required. "It's worth trying," Carlyle said finally. "I have access to blood supplies through the hospital. We could offer it to Bella and see if her body accepts it better than food." The idea revolted Bella on every level. Drinking blood, consuming the substance that defined vampires as predators, went against everything human in her nature. But the baby's needs superseded her revulsion, and when Carlyle presented her with a cup of human blood from the hospital's supply, Bella forced herself to drink. The blood was cold and thick and tasted like metal and copper, and Bella's stomach turned violently at the first swallow. But she forced it down, gagging through the entire cup, and waited to see if her body would reject this as completely as it had rejected everything else. Minutes passed, then an hour, and the blood stayed down. More significantly, Bella felt a surge of energy she hadn't experienced in days. The constant fatigue lifted slightly, and the baby's movements became less violent, as if the fetus had finally received the nutrition it needed. Carlyle examined Bella and found her vital signs improving marginally, her body responding positively to the blood in ways it hadn't responded to regular food. "It's working," Carlyle said, relief evident in his voice. "The blood is sustaining both you and the baby. Your body's accepting it." "I'm drinking blood to feed my vampire baby," Bella said, the words surreal even as she spoke them. "This is actually my life now." "I'm so sorry," Edward said, his voice breaking. "Bella, I'm so sorry you have to do this, that I've reduced you to this." "Stop apologizing," Bella said firmly, though exhaustion made her words slur slightly. "I chose this, Edward. Every part of it, including the blood drinking, as disgusting as it is." The routine shifted to accommodate Bella's new dietary needs. Several times a day, Rosalie or Carlyle brought her cups of blood, and Bella forced herself to drink despite the revulsion that never fully faded. She tried not to think about what she was consuming, tried to focus on the baby's needs rather than her own disgust. The blood help gave her strength she desperately needed, but it also made her feel less human with every swallow. The baby grew more rapidly now that proper nutrition was being provided. Bella's stomach expanded impossibly further, her body stretched beyond what should have been physically possible. More ribs cracked under the pressure, the sharp snaps audible to everyone in the house. Internal bleeding became a constant concern, Bella's body unable to heal the damage as fast as it was being inflicted. Carlyle prepared for every possible complication during the delivery. He assembled equipment and supplies that seemed more appropriate for a war zone than a birth. Tools designed to cut through materials that regular surgical instruments couldn't touch. He explained to Edward that traditional cesarean section wouldn't work, that the amniotic sac was too strong, that Edward might need to use his teeth to cut through and extract the baby. The horror of that possibility sat between them like a physical presence. Edward would have to bite Bella, would have to use his vampire teeth on her flesh while she was conscious and aware, would have to inflict the one violence he'd spent their entire relationship carefully avoiding. The thought of it made Edward physically ill despite vampires' inability to vomit. "I can't do it," Edward said to Carlyle during one of their planning sessions. "I can't bite her, Carlyle. What if I can't stop? What if the blood triggers my thirst and I kill her?" "You'll stop," Carlyle said with certainty. because Bella's life depends on it, and you love her more than you've ever loved anything. Your control will hold, Edward. It has to. Bella prepared for her own death with quiet efficiency that broke everyone's hearts. She wrote letters to Renee and Charlie, explaining nothing but expressing her love in ways that suggested she knew these might be final words. She talked to Jacob about the baby, made him promise to tell the child about her if she didn't survive long enough to meet them. She extracted promises from Rosalie to protect the baby, regardless of what happened during the delivery. And she talked to Edward about transformation, about the venom he would need to inject the moment the baby was delivered, about her certainty that she would wake as a vampire even if her human heart stopped beating during the birth. "I'm not afraid," Bella lied, because she was terrified, but didn't want Edward to carry that fear along with his guilt. "I've been waiting to become like you for so long, Edward. This is just happening sooner than we planned." "I'm supposed to die to become a vampire," Edward said, his voice rough with barely controlled emotion. "You were supposed to have years of human life first. You were supposed to experience everything you wanted before giving it up." "I've experienced enough," Bella said. "I've loved you, married you, created life with you. What else could I possibly need to experience?" The baby's kicks became visible from outside Bella's body, distortions that moved across her stomach like something from a horror film. But Edward began speaking to the baby through Bella's belly, his cold hand pressed against her skin, his voice gentle despite his fear and anger. "Be gentle with your mother," Edward murmured. "She loves you so much. She's sacrificing everything for you. Please don't hurt her more than necessary." And impossibly, miraculously, the baby seemed to respond. The violent kicks became less frequent, the movements gentler. Edward could hear the baby's thoughts now, rudimentary and instinctive but real. The baby loved Bella, recognized her mother's voice and heartbeat, didn't want to cause pain even though it couldn't stop growing. This knowledge tortured Edward further. The baby wasn't a monster or an abomination. It was their child, innocent and wanting only to be born, to meet the parents who'd created it. And that innocent child was killing Bella simply by existing. The standoff with Sam's pack continued outside, werewolves maintaining their vigil, while inside a human woman slowly died to bring new life into the world. Time was running out. The delivery was approaching, coming faster than anyone was ready for. And everyone in the house knew that when that moment arrived, everything would change. Bella would either survive or she wouldn't. The baby would either live or it wouldn't. Edward would either successfully transform Bella or he wouldn't. There were too many variables, too many points of potential failure, but there was no stopping what had been set in motion. They could only wait and prepare and hope that love would be enough to carry them through the nightmare ahead. The fragile peace between Sam's pack and the Cullens held through sheer force of will from both sides, each day bringing them closer to the moment when everything would either resolve or explode into violence. Sam maintained his wolves at the boundary line, their massive forms visible through the windows as they patrolled in shifts, never leaving the Cullen house unwatched. The message was clear. They were waiting, watching, ready to act the moment the half-vampire baby was born and proved itself a threat. Jacob's small pack of 3 operated as a defensive perimeter closer to the house, creating a buffer zone between Sam's wolves and the Cullens. Jacob himself rarely left Bella's side. His presence a comfort to her, even as it created additional tension in a house already stretched to breaking. Seth Clearwater maintained his usual optimism despite the circumstances, treating the entire situation like an adventure rather than a potential catastrophe. He'd formed an unlikely friendship with the Cullens, particularly Esme, whose maternal warmth extended even to werewolves who should have been natural enemies. Leah Clearwater was less enthusiastic about their new alliance. She remained bitter and resentful. Her thoughts, which Jacob could now hear through their small pack's mind link, full of anger at being dragged into this situation by her brother's loyalty to Jacob, but she stayed nonetheless, unwilling to abandon Seth, even though her own loyalties remained conflicted. She'd lost Sam to Emily, had watched the man she loved imprint on her cousin, and the pain of that betrayal colored everything she did. Bella found herself talking to Leah during one of the endless afternoons when movement was too painful and sleep wouldn't come. Leah had brought her another cup of blood, a task she performed with visible disgust but determined efficiency, and had stayed after Bella finished drinking, both women existing in uncomfortable silence before Bella finally spoke. "I know you don't want to be here," Bella said quietly. "I know you're only staying because of Seth. I'm sorry you got caught up in all this." "It's not your fault," Leah said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced of that. "You didn't ask Jacob to break from the pack. You didn't ask any of us to risk ourselves for you." "No," Bella agreed, "but I'm grateful anyway. You're protecting me and my baby when you have every reason not to. That means something." Leah was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes studying Bella with an intensity that felt invasive. "You're really willing to die for this baby," she finally said, and it wasn't quite a question. "You know the delivery will probably kill you, and you're doing it anyway." "Yes," Bella said simply. "This baby is mine and Edward's. I'll do whatever it takes to give it a chance at life." "I don't understand that kind of love," Leah admitted. "The kind that makes you sacrifice everything. Sam didn't love me that way. He imprinted on Emily and forgot I existed. And now, I'm watching you throw your life away for a baby that might not even survive, and I don't understand why anyone would choose that." "Because some things are worth more than survival," Bella said. "Some things are worth dying for. Love, family, the people who matter most to us. You stayed with Seth even though you hate being here. That's the same thing, Leah. You're sacrificing your comfort and your loyalty to Sam's pack because your brother matters more." Leah's expression softened slightly, something shifting behind her defensive walls. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe I'm just an idiot who can't let go of the people I love even when they don't love me back." The vulnerability in her words created a connection between them that surprised both women. They were different in almost every way, but they understood sacrifice and unrequited love and the complications of choosing family over everything else. Carlyle spent his days preparing for every possible outcome of the delivery. The living room had been transformed into something resembling a hospital operating room, equipment and supplies arranged with careful precision. He'd assembled multiple units of blood for transfusion, medications that might help even though vampire venom made most human drugs ineffective, instruments designed for the impossible task of delivering a half-vampire baby from a dying human mother. The preparations were clinical and thorough. but everyone knew they were inadequate. There were too many unknowns, too many variables that couldn't be planned for. They were attempting something unprecedented, and the best they could hope for was to respond to complications as they arose rather than preventing them entirely. Edward participated in the preparations with mechanical efficiency, his mind clearly elsewhere, even as his hands arranged instruments and checked equipment. He'd grown increasingly silent as the delivery approached, his brief conversations with Bella forced and strained, his guilt manifesting as emotional withdrawal. He was losing her, everyone could see it, watching the woman he loved slowly die while carrying his child, and the psychological toll was destroying him as surely as the pregnancy was destroying Bella. At night, when Bella finally managed to sleep despite the pain, Edward played piano in the next room. The music was haunting and beautiful and full of such desperate sorrow that even the werewolves outside paused in their patrol to listen. He played pieces he'd composed over his century of existence, melodies that captured loss and longing and love that transcended death. And he played pieces he was composing now, musical farewells to the woman who'd given his immortal existence meaning. Bella heard the music through her bedroom door and understood what it meant. Edward was saying goodbye, preparing himself for her death, building walls around his heart that would allow him to survive losing her. The knowledge hurt worse than her broken ribs, worse than the constant pain of the baby pressing against her organs. She wanted to go to him, to tell him she wasn't dying, that transformation would save her, that they would have eternity together once this was over. But moving was too difficult, and speaking required more breath than she could comfortably spare. So she listened to his music and cried silently into her pillow, mourning the pain she was causing him, even as she remained absolutely certain that this sacrifice was necessary. The baby's movements became more distinct as it grew larger and stronger. Bella could feel individual limbs now, could distinguish kicks from punches, could tell when the baby was sleeping versus awake. She talked to the baby constantly, her hand on her distended stomach, telling stories about Edward and the family waiting to meet them, preparing the child for the complicated world they would enter. She'd chosen a name weeks ago, Renesmee, a combination of Renee and Esme, honoring both her mother and Edward's adoptive mother in a single word. Edward hated the name, refused to use it, continued referring to the baby as it, or the creature, as if refusing to acknowledge its personhood would somehow make its existence less devastating. But Bella used the name constantly, claiming her daughter verbally, even though she'd never held her in her arms. Alice's visions remained frustratingly unclear regarding anything involving Bella or the baby. The hybrid child somehow blocked Alice's sight, creating a blind spot in the future that prevented her from seeing what would happen during the delivery or after. She caught glimpses of possibilities, Bella as a vampire, the baby alive and healthy, Edward devastated by loss, but nothing concrete enough to provide guidance or reassurance. "I'm sorry I can't see," Alice said to Bella one afternoon, frustration evident in her pixie features. "I'm supposed to be able to help, to warn you about dangers before they arrive, but with the baby blocking my visions, I'm useless." "You're not useless," Bella said. "You've been here supporting me, helping prepare. That's more than enough, Alice." But Alice's inability to see the future added another layer of anxiety to her already unbearable situation. They were moving forward blind, unable to anticipate complications or plan for specific scenarios. All they could do was prepare for everything and hope it was enough. Emmett tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy with his usual humor, making jokes that fell flat but were appreciated nonetheless for the effort they represented. He talked to Bella about arm wrestling after her transformation, about how she'd finally be strong enough to challenge him without risking broken bones. The future he described felt impossibly distant to Bella, a fantasy that might never materialize if something went wrong during the delivery. Jasper used his empathic gift to manage the emotional atmosphere of the house, dampening the worst of everyone's fear and anxiety to keep them functional. But the effort exhausted him, maintaining calm in the face of impending disaster taking its toll. He'd grown quieter as the days passed, conserving his energy for the moment when it would be needed most. Esme provided quiet support to everyone, maternal instincts making her uniquely suited to caring for a house full of terrified people preparing for tragedy. She brought Bella soft blankets and played gentle music and spoke soothingly about hope and survival and the strength of love. Her presence was a comfort even when words failed. Her belief that everything would work out somehow providing an anchor against the fear. The baby dropped lower in Bella's pelvis during the 3rd week after their return from Isle Esme, a sign that delivery was approaching. Carlyle examined Bella and estimated they had perhaps days rather than weeks remaining. The baby was enormous now, far larger than any human infant, and Bella's body was stretched beyond its limits, trying to accommodate the impossible pregnancy. "It could be any time now," Carlyle said quietly, though everyone in the house could hear regardless of volume. "We need to be prepared for labor to start without warning. Bella, when the contractions begin, you need to tell us immediately. We'll have very little time to prepare once active labor starts." Bella nodded, though fear made her throat tight. This was it then, the final waiting, the last days of her human life stretching ahead, with terrible certainty that they would end in either transformation or death. Edward maintained his vigil beside her, his cold hand holding her warm one, his golden eyes never leaving her face. He was memorizing her, Bella realized, cataloguing every detail of her human appearance in case transformation changed her beyond recognition, in case these were the last days he had with this version of the woman he loved. "I love you," Bella whispered, squeezing his hand with what little strength she retained. "No matter what happens, Edward, remember that I love you. This was my choice, all of it." "I love you too," Edward said, his voice breaking. "More than I thought I could love anything. You transformed my existence just by being in it, Bella. You gave me a reason to want forever." Outside, Sam's pack maintained their surveillance, waiting for the birth that would determine whether peace held or war became inevitable. Inside, her family prepared for the impossible, hoping love would be enough to carry them through what came next. And in Bella's womb, the baby waited to be born, innocent and unaware of the danger and devotion surrounding its existence. The moment was approaching, and no one was ready. The moment came without warning, en they. Grey afternoon that looked no different from any other day in Forks. Bella was sitting on the couch with Edward beside her, his arms around her carefully, both of them watching rain stream down the windows in patterns that might have been peaceful under different circumstances. Rosalie was reading in a nearby chair, her presence constant and protective. Jacob dozed on the floor, his large frame sprawled in a position that looked uncomfortable, but apparently wasn't. Carlyle was reviewing medical texts one more time, and the rest of the family occupied various positions throughout the house, everyone maintaining the careful vigilance that had characterized the past weeks. Then Bella's spine snapped. The sound was sharp and distinct, audible to everyone in the house despite the rain outside. Bella's scream followed immediately, pure agony that had no conscious thought behind it, just reaction to pain beyond anything she'd experienced before. Her back arced impossibly, the broken vertebrae in her spine shifting in ways that sent lightning bolts of suffering through her entire nervous system. Edward caught her before she could fall, his arms supporting her broken body with desperate care, his face stark with horror. "Carlyle," he shouted, though Carlyle was already moving, his medical bag in hand, centuries of practice making his response instantaneous. "The baby broke through her pelvis," Carlyle said, his hands already examining Bella, even as she writhed in Edward's arms. "It's coming now. We need to get her to the operating area immediately." They moved as one, Edward carrying Bella's fragile body with infinite care despite the urgency, settling her on the hospital bed they'd prepared for exactly this moment. Bella's vision was greying at the edges from pain and shock, her mind struggling to process what was happening even as her body betrayed her with its failure to contain the impossible child she'd been carrying. Alice appeared at Bella's side, her small hands gripping Bella's with desperate strength. "You're going to be okay," Alice said, though her visions showed nothing but static, the future occluded by the baby's presence. "You're going to survive this, Bella. You have to." "The baby," Bella gasped through the pain, her words coming in short bursts as speaking became nearly impossible. "The baby can't breathe. It's suffocating. Edward, I can feel it. The baby is dying inside me." Edward's hands moved to Bella's stomach, his vampire hearing focusing on the secondary heartbeat he'd been monitoring for weeks. The rhythm he found made his own still heart clench with fear. The baby's heart was racing, panicked, beating so fast it sounded like a hummingbird's wings. But beneath the speed was an erratic quality that suggested oxygen deprivation, the baby's distress evident in every irregular beat. "We have to get the baby out now," Edward said, looking at Carlyle with desperate urgency. "Right now, Carlyle. It's dying in there. Bella's body is failing and the baby is suffocating." Carlyle moved with practiced efficiency, his hands steady despite the crisis unfolding, preparing instruments with the calm that came from centuries of emergency medicine. But when he tried to cut through Bella's skin to reach the baby, the scalpel skated across the surface without penetrating. The pregnancy had changed Bella's body in ways they hadn't anticipated, the baby's presence somehow strengthening her tissue beyond normal human parameters. He tried again with a different blade, pressing harder, but the result was the same. The amniotic sac surrounding the baby was reinforced, tougher than any human membrane should be, designed by some quirk of vampire human biology to protect the fetus from external harm. But now that protection was a death sentence, trapping the baby as Bella's body collapsed around it. "I can't cut through it," Carlyle said, frustration and fear breaking through his usual calm. "The membrane is too strong. Normal surgical instruments aren't adequate. We need something stronger, something sharp enough to penetrate reinforced tissue. Edward understood immediately what Carlyle wasn't saying. They needed vampire teeth, needed venom-coated fangs designed by nature to tear through flesh and bone, needed Edward to do the one thing he'd spent their entire relationship carefully avoiding. He needed to bite Bella, to use his teeth on her flesh, to tear through her body to reach their dying child. The horror of it was overwhelming. Edward had spent every moment with Bella fighting his nature, resisting the instinct to bite her, controlling the monster that wanted to drain her dry. And now survival demanded he give in to exactly that instinct, that he bite down on the woman he loved and tear through her with teeth designed for killing. "Do it," Bella gasped, her hand finding Edward's, gripping with what little strength remained. Her brown eyes met his, lucid despite the pain, absolutely certain despite the terror. "Edward, please, save our baby. I don't care what it costs me. Just save Ren Esme. Please." Rosalie moved closer, her expression fierce. "Edward, if you can't do it, I will. But someone has to act now, or we lose them both." The thought of Rosalie's teeth on Bella made something possessive and violent rise in Edward's chest. No one else would touch her. No one else would bite her. This was his responsibility, his child, his mate. He would be the one to do this terrible, necessary thing. Edward's hand shook as he positioned himself over Bella's distended stomach, his teeth extending in response to instinct and necessity, everything in him screaming against what he was about to do. The baby's heartbeat was fading, weakening with each second that passed. A countdown toward death that could be measured in moments rather than minutes. Bella's eyes begged him to act despite his horror, her hand still gripping his, trusting him absolutely even as he prepared to wound her in ways he'd sworn he never would. He bit down. His teeth tore through the reinforced membrane with the ease of knife through paper, venom and strength combining to create the breach that surgical instruments couldn't manage. Blood flooded his mouth immediately. Bella's blood mixed with amniotic fluid, and the scent that had called to him more strongly than any other human since the moment he'd first encountered her exploded across his senses with overwhelming intensity. The thirst roared to life in his throat with volcanic force, demanding he drink, demanding he drain her, demanding satisfaction after months of resistance and denial. Every instinct Edward possessed screamed at him to bite deeper, to take more, to consume the blood that sang to him specifically with such maddening intensity. His vision tunneled, everything narrowing to the taste of her in his mouth and the monster inside him demanding he give in completely. But Edward's control held through sheer force of love and desperation. He tore through the membrane with precision rather than savagery, creating an opening large enough to extract the baby without causing more damage than absolutely necessary. His hands reached inside Bella's ruined body, finding the infant, pulling her free from the womb that had become a death trap. The movements were careful despite his speed, protective despite the violence required. The baby emerged covered in blood and vernix, her skin impossibly pale, her features already showing the distinctive beauty of vampire heritage mixed with Bella's human softness. She was tiny, smaller than a normal newborn despite the accelerated growth that had destroyed Bella from within. Her face held Edward's bone structure, Bella's full lips, a combination of both parents in ways that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. The baby was a girl, their daughter, Renesmee, the name Bella had chosen, now made real and tangible by her arrival into the world, but she wasn't breathing. The infant lay limp in Edward's blood-covered hands, her lips blue with oxygen deprivation, her tiny chest motionless. The delayed oxygen had stolen precious seconds from her, and now she hung suspended between life and death, waiting for someone to breathe life back into her. Rosalie moved with inhuman speed, taking the baby from Edward's hands before he could fully register the transfer. Her movements were sure and practiced, despite never having handled a newborn before, some maternal instinct guiding her actions with absolute certainty. She cleared the infant's mouth and nose with equipment Carlyle had prepared, suctioning the airways with gentle efficiency, her golden eyes focused with absolute intensity on the tiny life in her hands. Then she began compressions, her fingers impossibly gentle despite their strength, pressing on the infant's chest with precisely calibrated force. Too hard would crush the tiny rib cage, too soft would accomplish nothing. But Rosalie's touch was perfect, stimulating the infant's heart and lungs, refusing to accept that this miraculous child might not survive her own birth. "Come on," Rosalie whispered, her voice rough with emotion. "Come on, little one. Breathe. You're a fighter like your mother. So fight." And then finally, blessedly, the baby coughed. A tiny wet sound that was the most beautiful thing any of them had ever heard. She coughed again, stronger this time, her small body convulsing with the effort of expelling fluid from her lungs. Then she drew her first real breath, a gasping inhalation that expanded her chest and filled her lungs with air. The blue tint faded from her lips almost immediately, replaced by healthy pink. Her tiny chest began moving with a rhythm of independent breathing, shallow and fast but steady. Color flooded her pale skin, and her face scrunched in preparation for what came next. She cried, a sound that was simultaneously human and other, pitched slightly higher and clearer than normal infant vocalizations. The cry was strong and healthy and absolutely furious, an announcement that she'd entered the world and demanded attention. The sound filled the room, cutting through the tension like light through darkness, confirmation that against all odds their daughter lived. But Bella was dying. Edward turned back to Bella and saw disaster written across her body in blood and trauma. The emergency delivery had destroyed her internally. Massive hemorrhaging, evident in the blood pooling beneath her on the surgical table and dripping onto the floor below. Her heart struggled to pump fluid that was draining too quickly to sustain life, beating frantically but accomplishing nothing as her blood pressure plummeted towards zero. Her eyes were open but unfocused, her consciousness already fading toward darkness, her body shutting down system by system as organ failure cascaded through her. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, her lungs barely moving, her chest barely rising with each breath. She was dying in front of him, slipping away toward death while Edward stood paralyzed by horror. "Bella!" Edward's voice was raw with terror, breaking on her name. "Bella, stay with me. Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. You have to fight. Renesmee needs you. I need you." But Bella's eyes were already closing. Her last sight, the beautiful baby in Rosalie's arms, the daughter she'd sacrificed everything to bring into the world. She heard her daughter's cry, that strong, healthy sound that meant Renesmee lived, that their impossible child had survived despite everything. And beneath the pain and the fear and the awareness that she was dying, Bella felt profound gratitude. She'd done it. She'd given life to this miracle child. She'd protected Renesmee with her own body. And now their daughter would live, even if Bella didn't. Her last thought was love, enormous and all-encompassing, for Edward and for Renesmee, and for the family that would care for her daughter after she was gone. And then darkness took her, her consciousness fading toward nothing, as her heart struggled to beat without enough blood to pump, as her body surrendered to damage too severe to survive. Her heart's failing, Carlyle said, his hands already working to stop the hemorrhaging, to save what could be saved. His fingers pressed against torn tissue, trying to stem the bleeding. But there was too much damage, too many places where Bella's body had torn under the strain of delivering the half-vampire infant. Edward, you need to inject the venom now, right now. We're losing her. Edward's hands shook violently as he pulled the syringes of venom from the medical kit they'd prepared for exactly this moment. His own venom, extracted and preserved with meticulous care, stored in sterilized syringes ready for the transformation they'd always known would be necessary. But he'd imagined doing this after the baby was born safely, after Bella had held their daughter and said goodbye to her human life. Not like this. Not while she was dying, her blood covering everything, her heart failing beat by beat. He plunged the first syringe directly into Bella's heart, forcing venom into the failing muscle, praying it would be enough to trigger transformation even with her heart barely beating. The venom spread from the injection site, burning through cardiac tissue, beginning the slow process of conversion from human to vampire cells. Then he began biting every major artery point, his teeth finding her wrists and ankles and throat, injecting venom directly into her bloodstream through every method available. He bit down on her inner wrist, feeling her pulse flutter weakly against his tongue, then the other wrist, then both ankles, the femoral arteries in both thighs, the carotid arteries on either side of her throat. Every major blood vessel received venom, every possible entry point utilized to maximize the transformation's chance of success. The thirst screamed at him with each bite, Bella's blood calling to him with maddening intensity. But Edward's control held through sheer force of love and terror. Each time he bit down, he tasted her blood, felt it flood his mouth, felt the monster inside him demanding more. But he forced himself to inject and release, to move to the next artery point, to resist the overwhelming urge to drain her completely. He couldn't lose her, couldn't let her die, couldn't fail to transform her after everything they'd endured to reach this moment. Carlyle performed compressions on Bella's chest, manually pumping her heart, forcing what little blood remained through her system to carry the venom to every cell. The transformation needed a beating heart to spread properly, needed circulation to ensure complete conversion from human to vampire. Without it, the venom would pool uselessly in her still body, concentrated in whatever tissue it had reached but unable to complete its work. Keep her heart beating, Edward said desperately, his hands moving to assist Carlyle with the compressions. We need circulation. The venom has to reach every cell, or the transformation won't complete properly. Together they worked, Edward and Carlyle performing a macabre dance of salvation over Bella's dying body, compress and release, forcing her heart to beat when it wanted to stop, forcing her blood to move when gravity wanted it to pull and settle. Alice stood nearby, her visions useless, but her presence supportive, ready to assist if needed. Esme watched from the doorway, one hand over her mouth, her maternal heart breaking at the violence required to save her daughter. Edward listened to Bella's heart with desperate intensity, hearing it stutter and slow, hearing it struggle against the catastrophic damage her body had sustained. Each beat was weaker than the last, the muscle failing even as they tried to force it to continue. He could hear her blood moving sluggishly through her veins, could hear her lungs barely drawing breath, could hear her entire body shutting down. "Come on," he whispered, his voice breaking completely. "Come on, Bella. Fight. You have to fight. Renesmee needs you. I need you. Don't leave us. Please don't leave us." The baby's cry cut through the tension again, a sound that pulled everyone's attention briefly away from Bella's dying body. Rosalie had cleaned and wrapped the infant in soft blankets, and now she held Renesmee with such tender protectiveness that it transformed her face into something approaching maternal joy. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with eyes that were chocolate brown like Bella's, alert and aware in ways that seemed impossible for a newborn. Jacob stumbled into the room, drawn by the sounds of crisis, his eyes wild with fear for Bella. He'd been outside with Seth and Leah, maintaining the perimeter, but the screams and the scent of blood had pulled him back inside despite his usual reluctance to enter the vampire house. He saw the blood covering everything, saw Bella's still form on the surgical table, saw Edward performing what looked like violent assault on her body, even though it was desperate salvation, and Jacob's world tilted on its axis, grief and horror washing over him in waves that threatened to drown him. "She's dead," Jacob said, his voice hollow with devastation. "Bella's dead. You killed her. You and that thing killed her." "She's not dead," Edward snarled, without looking up from his work, his hands never stopping their compressions on Bella's chest. "The venom is working. The transformation has started. She's not dead." But even as Edward spoke the words, Bella's heart gave its final beat. A single weak pulse, barely strong enough to move blood, and then nothing. Silence where her heartbeat should have been. Absolute stillness where life had existed moments before. She lay motionless on the blood-soaked table, her face pale and still, her chest no longer rising with breath, looking more like a corpse than someone undergoing transformation. "No," Edward said, the word coming out as a broken sound somewhere between denial and prayer. "No, no, no. Bella, please, please don't go. Stay with me. Stay." He continued compressions frantically, trying to restart her heart, trying to force circulation even though there was no heartbeat to support his efforts. But it was useless. Bella's heart had stopped. Her lungs had stopped. Every system in her body had shut down simultaneously. She was gone. Carlyle pulled Edward back gently but firmly, his hands on Edward's shoulders, his voice soft with compassion. "Edward, stop. You've done everything possible. The venom is in her system. Now we wait and see if it's enough." Her heart stopped, Edward said, his voice breaking completely. Tears that vampires couldn't cry, making his eyes burn. "Carlyle." Her heart stopped. How can she transform without a beating heart to circulate the venom? "She's gone. I lost her." "I don't know," Carlyle admitted quietly, his own grief evident despite his attempt at clinical detachment. "This is unprecedented. Transformation requires circulation, requires a living body to work with. But the venom is in her system, concentrated around her heart, and in every major artery. It may be enough. We have to hope it's enough. Jacob couldn't bear to look at Bella's body any longer, couldn't process the sight of her lying dead while vampires stood around claiming she was transforming. His grief was too large to contain, threatening to tear him apart from the inside. He'd loved her for so long, had hoped even knowing it was hopeless, had broken from his pact to protect her, and now she was gone anyway, killed by the very thing he'd tried to save her from. He turned blindly, stumbling from the room, his vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall, his massive frame shaking with the force of emotions he couldn't name. He needed air, needed space, needed anything except the sight of Bella's corpse and Edward's denial. He made it 3 steps into the hallway before he saw Rosalie, still holding the baby, standing in the doorway with an expression that combined protectiveness and something almost like fear. She was guarding the infant, Jacob realized, protecting it from his grief and rage, worried he might blame the baby for Bella's death. Jacob's eyes locked on the infant in Rosalie's arms, intending hatred and blame, preparing to rage at the creature that had killed Bella with its very existence. He would tell this child exactly what it had cost to bring her into the world, would make sure she knew she'd murdered her mother. But the moment his eyes met the baby's, everything changed. The imprint hit Jacob like a physical blow, like lightning striking his soul, like the earth shifting beneath his feet. The world reorganized itself around this tiny life with a force that redefined his entire existence. Everything he'd been, everything he'd wanted, everything he'd believed about himself realigned in an instant toward one central truth. She was his. Not romantically, not yet, perhaps not ever in that way, but his to protect, his to serve, his to devote his life to. The baby looked at him with eyes that were chocolate brown like Bella's, set in a face that held Edward's bone structure and Bella's sweetness. And Jacob felt every purpose he'd ever had reshape itself around her needs. His love for Bella transformed instantly into something different. Protective rather than romantic, brotherly rather than desperate. The ache of unrequited love that had defined him for years simply vanished, replaced by clarity and purpose so absolute it felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. He didn't love Bella any less, but the nature of that love had shifted into something he could live with, something that didn't tear him apart. And in Bella's place, an absolute and all-consuming devotion to this child settled into the core of his being. She was his imprint, his purpose, his reason for existing. Jacob would die for this baby without hesitation, would reshape his entire life around her needs, would become whatever she needed him to be. Through the pack mind link that connected him to Seth and Leah, they felt Jacob's imprint snap into place. The sensation was unmistakable, impossible to hide or diminish, a fundamental change in Jacob's being that resonated through their shared consciousness. Seth's joy was immediate and uncomplicated, thrilled that the tension and potential violence had been resolved by this ancient magic. Jake imprinted, his mental voice practically shouted with enthusiasm, "On the baby. That means she's protected. That means the pack can't hurt her." Leah's reaction was more complex, a mixture of disgust and relief that warred in her consciousness. She was repulsed that Jacob had imprinted on an infant, that the magic had bound him to someone who wouldn't be an adult for years. but she was also relieved that it meant protection for the child and therefore peace with Sam's pack, an end to the threat of violence that had hung over them all, because pack law was absolute. No wolf could harm an imprinted one. The prohibition went deeper than treaty or morality, was woven into the very magic that created shapeshifters. The baby was now untouchable, protected by bonds older than memory, sacred in ways that transcended logic or reason. And through the mind link, the knowledge of Jacob's imprint spread beyond his small pack, to Sam's wolves maintaining surveillance outside. They felt it too, the fundamental shift in Jacob's being, the absolute protection now extended to the half-vampire child they'd planned to destroy. The imprint changed everything, dissolved their attack plans, transformed an enemy into someone who must be protected at all costs. The war was over before it could truly begin. The baby was safe, and Jacob stood in the hallway, staring at the infant who'd just become the center of his universe, feeling both profound loss and overwhelming purpose in equal measure. "Her name is Renesmee," Rosalie said quietly, reading something in Jacob's expression, understanding what had just happened, even though she'd never witnessed an imprint before. Bella chose the name, a combination of Renee and Esme. "Renesmee," Jacob repeated, testing the name, feeling how it fit in his mouth. It was strange and too long and absolutely perfect. "Can I hold her?" Rosalie hesitated for only a moment before carefully transferring the baby into Jacob's large arms. Renesmee settled against his chest with complete trust, her tiny hand curling against his warm skin, and Jacob felt something in his chest crack open with the overwhelming rightness of it. Back in the operating room, Edward maintained vigil over Bella's body, his hand on her chest where her heart had stopped beating, listening with desperate intensity for any sign that transformation was occurring despite the impossible circumstances. Carlyle checked her vital signs repeatedly, finding nothing. No breath, no heartbeat, no indication that life remained in her still form. But Edward heard something the others couldn't. The venom spreading through Bella's system despite her still heart, moving through her bloodstream with its own momentum, reaching cells and beginning the slow process of transformation. It wasn't moving through circulation because there was no circulation. Instead, it spread through osmosis and diffusion, seeping from cell to adjacent cell, converting tissue incrementally rather than systematically. "She's transforming," Edward said, his voice rough with exhausted hope. "I can hear it. The venom is working." "Are you certain?" Carlyle asked, wanting desperately to believe, but unable to confirm what Edward claimed to hear with his enhanced senses. "Yes," Edward said with absolute conviction. "I can hear the venom moving through her cells. It's slower than normal because her heart isn't beating to circulate it, but it's working. She's transforming, Carlyle. Bella's going to survive this." The family gathered around Bella's body, all of them desperately wanting to believe Edward's words, needing to trust that their sister and daughter and friend would wake from this death-like state as one of them. The transformation would take 3 days, Carlyle said quietly. 3 days for the venom to convert every cell, to rebuild Bella from human into vampire. 3 days of waiting and hoping and praying. 3 days until they knew if love had been enough to save her. Bella's consciousness existed somewhere between death and becoming, trapped in darkness that held both peace and fire. The transformation consumed her cell by cell, venom spreading through tissue with patient inevitability, rewriting her biology from human into something other. She'd remembered Edward's description of his own transformation, the 3 days of Bernie that had seemed endless, the agony that made death seem preferable to continuation. But Bella's transformation was different. Her heart had stopped before the venom could circulate properly, leaving her suspended in a death-like state, while the conversion happened incrementally rather than systematically. The fire existed, burning through her veins with the intensity Edward had described, but it was slower, more controlled, spreading from the concentration points where Edward had injected venom outward through her body. She couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't respond to the voices she occasionally heard filtering through the darkness. Edward's voice, constant and desperate, telling her to fight, to come back to him, to survive this impossible transformation. Rosalie's voice, softer, telling Bella that Renesmee was beautiful and healthy and waiting to meet her mother. Carlyle's voice, clinical and measured, discussing the transformation's progress with Edward in medical terms. Bella barely comprehended. Bella focused on staying still, on not fighting the fire even though every instinct screamed at her to struggle against the pain. Edward had told her that fighting made the transformation worse, that accepting the burn allowed it to pass more quickly. So Bella surrendered to the agony, let it consume her without resistance, and thought about Edward and about Renesmee and about the future that awaited her if she survived this. The baby, her daughter. Bella's last sight before darkness had claimed her was Renesmee in Rosalie's arms, alive and breathing and crying with healthy fury. That image sustained her through the burning, gave her something to hold on to when the pain threatened to erase everything else. She'd done it. She protected her daughter, given her life, brought her safely into the world. Whatever happened to Bella now, Renesmee existed, and that was worth any price. Meanwhile, outside Bella's transforming body, the world continued without her participation. Jacob's imprint on Renesmee had fundamentally altered the dynamics between the vampires and the werewolves, transforming potential enemies into reluctant allies bound by magic older than memory. Sam's pack had withdrawn from their surveillance positions, the threat they'd represented dissolving the moment Jacob's imprint became known through the pack consciousness. Sam himself had come to the boundary line to speak with Jacob, the former alpha and the current alpha, standing on opposite sides of an invisible line that had once defined their relationship. Jacob had phased to human form for the conversation, though his attention remained partly focused on the house behind him where Renesmee slept under Rosalie's watchful protection. "You imprinted," Sam said, and his voice held no judgment, just acknowledgement of the reality that now governed them all. "On the half-vampire child. Her name is Renesmee," Jacob said firmly. "And yes, I imprinted, which means she's protected by pack law, untouchable, sacred." "I know what it means," Sam said quietly. "The imprint changes everything, Jacob. We can't harm her now, won't harm her. The prohibition goes too deep to violate, even if we wanted to." "Do you want to?" Jacob asked, his voice hard. "Do you still think she's a threat that needs to be eliminated?" Sam was quiet for a long moment, his expression troubled. "I don't know what she is," he admitted finally, "but she's yours now, your imprint. And that makes her pack in a way, protected. We'll honor that, Jacob. The treaty is complex now, but we'll find a way to make it work." The conversation had ended with an uneasy peace, both sides agreeing to watch and wait and see what Renesmee became as she grew. Because the baby was growing with the same accelerated pace that had characterized her gestation. In the 3 days since her birth, she'd already changed visibly, her features becoming more defined, her awareness increasing beyond normal newborn parameters. Rosalie had become Renesmee's primary caretaker, a role she'd claimed with fierce possessiveness that surprised no one who understood her history. She fed the baby a mixture of blood and human food, discovering that Renesmee could digest both, her hybrid nature allowing her to exist between vampire and human dietary needs. She changed diapers and sang lullabies and held the baby with such tender devotion that it transformed her into someone almost unrecognizable from the cold, bitter vampire she'd been before. Jacob was a constant presence, drawn to Renesmee by the imprint bond that had reorganized his entire existence around her needs. He learned to hold her properly, to support her head and keep her secure, to respond to her different cries with the intuition the imprint provided. He told her stories about Bella, about her mother's courage and sacrifice, preparing Renesmee for when Bella woke from transformation. Edward never left Bella's side except to hunt when the thirst became too overwhelming to resist. He sat beside her transforming body, his hand on her chest, where her heart remained silent, his enhanced hearing tracking the venom's progress through her system. He spoke to her constantly, telling her about Renesmee, about the family waiting for her, about the future they would have together once this ordeal ended. The fire in Bella's body intensified as the transformation neared completion, concentrating in her heart, burning through the cardiac muscle with increased intensity. This was the final stage, Carlyle had explained, when the venom completed its work, and the body either accepted the transformation or failed entirely. The heart would give one final beat as it finished converting, and then stillness, and then awakening as something new. Bella felt the fire building in her chest, felt it consuming her heart cell by cell, felt the moment approaching when she would either wake as a vampire or simply cease to exist. She gathered what remained of her consciousness, focusing everything on that one organ, willing it to survive the conversion, to emerge strong and perfect and ready for eternal existence. The pain peaked, became unbearable, became everything. And then suddenly, it stopped. The fire vanished as if someone had thrown a switch, leaving behind absolute stillness, absolute silence, absolute peace. Bella's consciousness expanded into her new body, awareness flooding through transformed cells, senses exploding into capabilities she'd never imagined. She could hear everything: the rain on the roof, the wind in the trees, the breathing of people throughout the house, the sound of blood moving through living veins. She could smell everything, sense layered upon sense with complexity that made her human nose seem broken by comparison. And she could feel Edward's hand on her chest, cold and marble hard, no different from her own transformed flesh now. Bella opened her eyes and saw a world in perfect clarity for the first time. The world resolved into sharp clarity, every detail vivid beyond anything Bella had experienced as a human. She saw Edward's face above her, his golden eyes wide with hope and fear and desperate love. And she understood with sudden certainty that she was seeing him truly for the first time, not through the limitations of human vision, but with vampire sight that captured every perfect detail of his marble features. "Bella," Edward whispered, his voice breaking on her name. "You're awake. You're yourself. You survived." Bella tried to speak and heard her own voice emerge, different, more resonant, carrying a musicality that hadn't existed before. "Renesmee," she said, the name her first word in this new existence. "Where's my daughter?" Relief flooded Edward's expression. She remembered. She was coherent. The transformation had left her mind intact, her memories preserved, her essential self unchanged despite the radical alteration of her physical form. "Rosalie has her," Edward said. "Do you want to meet her? Are you ready?" Bella sat up in one fluid motion, her body responding with grace and strength that felt foreign and natural simultaneously. She was aware of the thirst, a burning in her throat that called for satisfaction, but it was manageable, controlled by determination and love that exceeded hunger. "Yes," she said. "Please, I need to see her." Rosalie appeared in the doorway, holding Renesmee with careful tenderness, and Bella's enhanced vision captured every detail of her daughter. Bronze curls that caught the light, chocolate brown eyes so like Bella's own had been, features that blended Edward's beauty with Bella's softness into something entirely unique. The baby was warm. Bella could sense it from across the room, her heartbeat steady and strong, her scent carrying notes of both vampire and human. Bella rose from the bed, moving with the supernatural grace of her new form, and crossed to where Rosalie stood. "May I hold her?" she asked, her voice soft with wonder and barely contained emotion. Rosalie transferred Renesmee into Bella's arms, and the baby's small hand reached up to touch her mother's face. The moment their skin connected, Bella saw images flood her mind, memories from Renesmee, shown through the baby's unique gift. Bella's voice singing to her in the womb, Edward's face leaning close, speaking gentle words, the love that had surrounded Renesmee from her first moment of existence. "She can show you her thoughts," Edward said softly, his arms coming around both Bella and Renesmee, completing the circle of their new family. Through touch, it's her gift. Bella stared at her daughter, this impossible miracle they'd created, and felt complete in ways she'd never imagined possible. She was a vampire now, strong enough to protect those she loved, immortal enough to watch Renesmee grow, transformed enough to stand beside Edward as an equal, rather than something fragile requiring constant protection. The family gathered around them, Carlisle and Esme with parental pride, Alice vibrating with joy at finally being able to see Bella's future again, Jasper maintaining calm, Emmett grinning with relief, Rosalie beaming with the satisfaction of seeing her protected child united with her mother, and Jacob standing at the edge of the room, his imprint bond evident in the way he watched Renesmee with absolute devotion. "Welcome to immortality, Bella," Carlisle said gently. "Welcome to the family, officially." Bella looked around at the people who'd become her family, at the husband who transformed her existence simply by loving her, at the daughter who'd cost her everything and given her more in return. She'd sacrificed her humanity, her mortal life, her future as a human. But she'd gained forever. She'd gained strength. She'd gained the ability to protect those she loved, rather than always being protected. The Volturi still existed as a distant threat, their eventual discovery of Renesmee's existence inevitable. Questions remained about what Renesmee would become, how her hybrid nature would develop, what dangers still waited in the shadows. But for now, in this moment, Bella stood in the center of her family with her daughter in her arms and her husband at her side, and she felt only peace. She had become what she'd always wanted. The transformation was complete. The sacrifice had been made and accepted, and the future stretched ahead, filled with challenges she would face as a vampire rather than a human, as someone strong rather than fragile, as a mother protecting her child rather than a child requiring protection. Bella Swan had died. Isabella Cullen had been born from her ashes, and the impossible love that had started in a high school biology class had survived every obstacle placed before it, emerging transformed but unbroken on the other side of death itself. This was not an ending. This was a beginning. The first page of forever, written in choices made and prices paid, and love that transcended every limitation mortality had tried to impose. And as Bella held her daughter close and felt Edward's arms around them both, she knew with absolute certainty that she would face whatever came next without fear, because love had been enough. Love had saved her. Love had given her everything. Close your eyes now, dreamy travelers, and rest in the knowledge that sometimes the impossible becomes real, that sometimes sacrifice leads to triumph, and that sometimes love truly is enough to overcome even death itself. The story continues beyond this moment, but for now, let peace embrace you as you drift into dreams, where forever is not a burden but a gift, and where every ending is simply a new beginning waiting to unfold. Sleep well, and know that love endures.